Well, a very good morning to you all. Very warm welcome to the 2023 Powerful Women Annual Conference. To those of you in the room and online, I apologise, we're running a few minutes behind, but there's a great buzz in the room. My name is Nick Waith. I am on the board of Powerful Women, and I'm also the Chief Executive of the Energy Institute. For those of you who don't know who the EI is, we're the chartered membership body for people in energy. You may know us through events like International Energy Week, the Statistical Review of World Energy, and a bunch of other stuff we do. So do get involved. We're very, very proud to be the home of Powerful Women. We have an independent board for Powerful Women. Many of the board members are here today. And if you quickly want to raise your hands, board members. And a very warm welcome to you all. Some of you may be wondering why on earth you've come to the Powerful Women Conference. The first thing you see is a man standing up on stage. Have you come to the wrong address? Well, actually, I'm just doing the comparing and some of the administrative things today. But more seriously, we've recognised the role of allies in this cause and every cause when it comes to diversity and inclusion. 2 years ago, I counted, we had 5 men in the room. Last year, we just got into double digits. I think this year we are well into 20 or so men in the room. So a huge shift in the engagement of males. And that's one of the big themes we've talked about in a session we've just had with the ELC with Minister Soloway, and one of the themes we'll be focusing on next year. So let me just cover a few of the administrative housekeeping points. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, so in the unlikely event that happens, the fire exits to your left and in that corner. If you are downstairs, there may be a more convoluted route out of the building. The assembly point is basically further along Birdcage Walk. You'll be guided by staff from the IMechE opposite St James's Square, but you don't need to cross the road. Just ask you to look after your bags and don't leave stuff around. If anybody needs special assistance today, please do let a member of the PFW team know. There is Wi-Fi for those that need it. I think the password is going to come up on screen, but it's IMechE George 1847. We've got Steve and Tanya, where Tanya is taking photographs. Hi, Tanya, good to have you here. If you don't want your photograph featured in social media or in anything, please let one of them know. And there will be videos available on the Powerful Women YouTube shortly after the event today. Please get involved. This is about hearing every voice we can. We'll have roving microphones going around today. Please use the breaks and the networking opportunities to really get to connect with people. We're delighted to have both members of the Powerful Women Board and several members of the Energy Leaders Coalition, more on which you'll hear later. And finally, a huge thank you to our sponsors. They'll roll onto screen in just a minute. But clearly, without their support and their engagement, today would not be possible. So with that, I'm shortly going to hand over to Katie. But before you stand up, Katie, we're going to run a very short video. And if you can roll the video, please.
So let me add my welcome to you all this morning. I'm Katie Jackson. I'm the chair of Powerful Women, and I'm delighted to be hosting our 6th annual conference in this fantastic venue. So it is great to be back with you for what has become the forum for the UK energy companies and their leaders to engage with peers, with other business leaders, D&I experts, and women who work in the industry to talk about the gender diversity and inclusion issues of the day and work out how we make a real difference together. Today's event is going to be hybrid. So as well as the packed room here in London, I'm delighted to welcome, I think, around 600 delegates who are joining us through our live stream for this morning's event. So that's a really impressive number. Last year, the feedback was that it was our best conference ever, but I think that we have an even better agenda for you here this year, and we're honoured that the Minister is joining us too, and it's great also to have so many inspiring speakers sharing their insights and practical advice today. So I think I'd just echo Nick's words. Please do really take part in the debate. We want to hear all of your views and opinions too on this year's theme, which is, are we investing in the diverse skills, strengths and talents needed for our energy future? I think as the video really summed up, we all know the why of diversity and we've known it for some time. And we all recognise that action is needed. And I think the data that we published this year on women in the energy sector kind of reinforces that. But are we really doing enough? And if not, how do we ramp things up? So I'm looking forward today not just to get some insights or some more insights on barriers, but also to really focus on some practical and tangible actions that we can all take away. So in this morning's plenary, we'll be hearing what the energy companies in our Energy Leaders Coalition have achieved in the past year against their own targets and commitments, particularly in terms of developing women in middle management. We'll be hearing what other energy leaders and skills experts believe about barriers to diversity and inclusion and what will make a difference. And we're also going to hear from other business sectors, and I think that's a really important thing that we should do, to learn from leaders and D&I experts in banking, tech, retail and pharmaceuticals on what has worked for them. And our live stream part of this event will end at 1:30 today. But for those of you who are here in person, there's also a chance to network over lunch, including chatting with our board members who are here and also members of the ELC. And then this afternoon, we're going to be running in-person workshops. So 2 of the workshops are designed for those working on or influencing D&I in their organisation, and 2 are for women who want to advance their careers. And there are 4 topics, which are creating a culture of belonging, psychological flexibility, asking for recognition and reward, and having honest conversations as an ally. And if you haven't selected a workshop yet and you want to attend, please speak to a member of our team during the break. And I think you can see Georgina and then Anna and Grace sort of waving. Yes, Anna's at the back there. And thanks to those who have helped us to provide those workshops. So the providers or sponsors are Just Add Water, Ala Levadnyaya, Enact Solutions and Edit Development, and thanks to all of those. So I really encourage you to use today as an opportunity to contribute, learn and share your experiences and take back insights and actions to your organisations. I really look forward to sharing an enjoyable and hopefully inspiring event with you and to chatting to many of you throughout. And please, for those of you in person here, do stay for our drinks reception after between 4:30 and 5:30. So welcome, and I think I'm going to hand back to Nick.
Thank you. Just very, very briefly, you'll be glad to know. I now have the pleasure of inviting the Right Honourable Amanda Soloway, MP for Derby North. You've held many ministerial roles, but you were appointed as Minister of Energy, Consumers and Affordability in February this year. We're absolutely thrilled to have you with us. And I would just say, in a very short space of time, just 9 months, you've brought huge passion. You've been a real supporter and champion for everything Powerful Women is doing. You've got a real kind of comes from the heart and a real drive to get into action. So it's brilliant to have you with us today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And it is a great pleasure to be here today. Apologies, I've got a little bit of a sore throat. And last night I was moaning how poorly I felt, but I'm a lot better today. So hopefully you can hear me. And it is really genuinely a great pleasure. We've had a great meeting first thing this morning. And I care passionately, and I think as you were saying, Nick, about how we really change the workplace and make it an inclusive workplace. And that's one of the things we're here today. And powerful women are just really part of the way that we go forward on that. And of course, the other people have a massive influence will be yourselves as well. So thank you so much for coming here today. As you can see, I'm a woman, I'm an MP, I'm a minister, I'm also a mother and a grandmother. And one of my granddaughter, it's her birthday tomorrow, actually. She's 4 years old. And she's the little love of my life. I was there the day she was born. In fact, we were at hospital this time 4 years ago. And ever since, it's just, the voyage has been incredible. And my wish is not that she feels that she has to fight for her place in the workplace, but just that it's normal. And that in 20 years' time or even 10 years' time or sooner, that we just have this normal. We don't think about gender. We don't think about diversity. We just think that it's normal for everybody to have an opportunity in the workplace. So that's one of the things I really care passionately about. So you here today, we've had a lot of hard work shining a torch really on the diversity and encouraging gender equality and diversity in this sector. And that is just so important. But I want to be clear, it's an amazing time to work in the sector, and energy is just going to get more exciting. And there's lots of things that are happening. And I think from just where we are today, but even going into fusion and other kinds of energy, it's just absolutely, the sky is the limit. And we know that we're reinforcing onshore electricity network, which will support, in my understanding, around about 20,000 to 80,000 new jobs, which is absolutely incredible. And then the offshore wind sector could also support up to 90,000 direct and indirect jobs. And if you think about that, that opportunity is immense for all of us. And then we've got carbon capture and storage, which is an exciting new industry that will form part of the cost-effective route to net zero. And again, that will support 50,000 jobs. So these are just a few sectors that will dominate the upcoming green revolution. But in my view, if we are going to truly succeed, we need to make sure that we're getting the best and brightest minds to drive this new age forward. And that includes all of us here and all of those like my granddaughter for the future. And we really need to make sure that what we're doing is encouraging people into this energy sector. We need to be holding their hand. We need to be embracing them to come along with us. And right now, we're just simply not making enough of the talent in this country, and particularly the female talent. And I know we saw the video that we were watching earlier, and we were talking about the numbers, and it's quite startling, isn't it, when we think that only 20% of the UK's top 80 energy employers have no women on their boards. I mean, that's, it just doesn't seem right. So what we need to do is we need to be doing more. And in 2023, we should be better along. I know we've had this conversation earlier. I wish we were further along. But now, rather than talking about it, I just feel as though we need to be pushing forward and actually going into action to do something about it. And we need more people like Gwen Parry-Jones, who's the first woman in the United Kingdom to run a nuclear power station. I mean, how fantastic is that? But we should have more. And she was awarded an OBE for her services to science and technology during her time at EDF. And I'm delighted that she's helping to deliver our nuclear programme. And we need more people like Julia Kirkia, BP's Executive Vice President of Strategy and Sustainability as well. Or indeed Angela Wilkinson, the Secretary General of the World Energy Council. They're just some names, but I would love to see more names on that list. And so what we want to do is we want to break down perceived barriers to working in the energy sector. We want to boost diversity and increase STEM skills. And we can do this through lots of schemes that we have. We can also do it working together. I'm thinking about the Build Back Better campaign, a really important campaign to get more diversity in the workplace. And in the first half of next year, the government's Green Jobs Delivery Group will publish a Green Jobs Plan. And this is an action plan that will include actions on equality, diversity and inclusions for the green sector. So again, incredibly important. And we're making a clear commitment from the government's point of view to make sure that we get women and girls into the sector. We get more women and girls in this amazing sector. We're doing it by raising awareness in green education, by training and careers, and making sure that we do lots of other campaigns and work together with people like we're here today in Powerful Women. So what I want to do is I want to ensure that women don't just come into the environment, but also they stay and excel as well. And that's a really important part of what we do. It's about nurturing the talent and making women and feel welcome in the workplace. There are lots of schemes that we have as well. And as we've seen, we're also proud of the signatories of the Equality and Energy Transition Initiative and the Equal by 30 campaign as well, to name just a few of the campaigns that we're doing. But what I want to do today is really hand over to you guys, because it's really important that we have these discussions. It's really important that we talk openly about what we can do and talk, but then make sure that we do translate that into action. So I'd like to thank you very much for having me here today. It's the greatest of pleasure to come along. I have so much time for Powerful Women, you know that. I'm often here. I feel like I'm an honorary board member. Maybe you'd consider that. We could talk about that. Because the commitment is to leave no woman alone, and that is really important. My note, and I was reading this, said that I should mention that we need to build a world where my granddaughter can look up to women like Gwen, Julia and Angela. But my challenge is that she shouldn't have to look up to them, that it should just be normal to have that aspiration. And that's what we're here for today. So thank you very much. Thank you.
So thank you so much for that. I think I do personally really appreciate the effort and the support that you've given to Powerful Women and to this cause as well. And I think it is, as Nick said, obvious that you feel real passion for this topic. I also think your energy and enthusiasm for the sector actually and for the upcoming transition to net zero really shines through. And I think we really appreciate your commitment to help. I also have the North Star that this will be just normal at a certain point. And I think that's a really important thing for us all to hold up. But I'm here again to just set the scene for this morning's discussion with a bit of a reminder and maybe even a reinforcement of what was in the video of what the current state of gender diversity is in the UK energy sector. And we are working very hard for a gender balanced, diverse and inclusive sector in the future and to reach that it's just normal state. We were established in 2014, so we're coming up to 10 years, to really address quite significant underrepresentation of women at the top table of UK industry. And this time last year, we launched our new ambitious target to see at least 40% of middle management and leadership roles in the UK energy sector held by women by 2030. And for me, that really should be a goal that we can reach. So I think this is a great slide. And I really do believe that in this space, data is king. So data can help us drive accountability and delivery by measuring where we are against where we want to get to. And it can also reveal the obstacles. And so every year since 2015, we've been gathering and reporting gender diversity data from the UK's 80 largest energy employers. And at the moment, those 80 represent about 200,000 people. And so this chart does show progress, and it shows progress since 2015 in terms of female representation on boards and also in executive director positions, which we think is a kind of good proxy for decision-making roles. And you can see that we have witnessed a slow and steady rise from really, frankly, very low numbers of 9% and 5% in 2015. But that In fact, it's a threefold increase since 2015, and we now have women occupying 29% of all board seats and 16% of executive director roles. But as a sector, I think it's really important to understand that we are still lagging behind others, and that this level of progress is, in my opinion, too slow. There's a big gap to fill if we're going to reach our target of 40% by the end of this decade. The FTSE 350 met the 40% target at board level this year. And on a positive note, our latest analysis of 16 of the UK's largest energy employers, which we're actually publishing today, shows that 10 of those companies have also already met this target. But as you saw in the video, in 2023, we still have over a fifth of companies in our sector with an all-male board, and 3/4 which have no female executive directors. And frankly, I find that pretty shocking in 2023. So all-male boards, for example, disappeared from the FTSE 100 in 2014 and the FTSE 350 in 2020. And I think really they should be a thing of the past in our sector too. Those companies should really be asking themselves whether their boards are working for them. Do they really generate the ideas? Do they accurately assess risk? Or does groupthink impact performance? I think one of the things that I also think we need to focus on is just a handful of female CEOs in the largest, in the largest 80 UK energy companies. And getting women into these key executive roles is proving to be difficult, not just in energy. So at our annual State of the Nation event in June, we were lucky enough to have Denise Wilson, the CEO of the FTSE Women Leaders Review, come and talk to us. And she made the point that the availability of talent really isn't the problem. We actually have the strongest supply ever of experienced and capable women in business. We just have to work harder to remove barriers and appoint them to decision-making roles. So if we flip on one slide. This year we've started to report some new data. So in line with our new target, we've also gathered data. I apologize, have some water. This could be the start of winter, or maybe I've picked up your sore throat already. But this year we also gathered data on women in leadership, which we defined as the executive committee and their direct reports. Not all companies were able to provide us with this data yet, and I think that shows a little bit the challenge of getting proper data on diversity. But those who did have the data represent by far the majority of large employers. And actually this paints a more optimistic picture on progress towards our new target. So women currently occupy 31% of the leadership roles in the top 80 companies. And on middle management, also data we published for the first time this year, we can see that women occupy 32% of roles. Progress in middle management is crucial to the future leadership pipeline. So I think this is going to be a continued focus for us at Powerful Women over the coming years. And I think it's really important that those companies who don't have the data do more to define and collect the data about their employees. And while these pictures show that currently women are working at these middle management levels, it's also really important that companies work hard to retain them. And we've done some research on that over the last year that I'll come back to in a minute. So next year, I hope that we can continue to gather and report more complete data on these two measures, and I'm looking forward to seeing the numbers continue to rise. So taking a look now on the next slide at where energy is versus other sectors. I think this is a really interesting comparison. So on the left-hand side, you can see the data actually I was talking about a minute ago. So you can see the FTSE 350 data on women on boards at 40%, or actually now 41%, which actually puts the UK second in terms of the international league table, just behind France. And that 41% compares to 29% for women on boards for our top 80 energy sector companies. And for leadership, the gap is lower or smaller, so 34 versus 31%. And here you can also see the sector comparisons when it comes to female representation across all levels, so from entry level to executive. And this is the data from the Office of National Statistics workforce figures, which came out in September. And you can see that electricity and gas is the pink one highlighted there, showing 29%, which is 1% higher than last year. But it's also dropped down the league table, being overtaken this year by agriculture, forestry, and fishing. And you can also see mining and construction right in the bottom corner there. So there is, I think, a lot to learn from other sectors. And so I'm delighted that later this morning we will have a panel to share and explore what works well in other industries and what the energy sector can learn. So why does this matter? If we go forward to the next slide, and I actually think the video did a great job of this, but we all want to look forward to a clean, secure and affordable energy future. And we need to build the absolute best talent pool that we can for the future with new approaches and skills and without groupthink. We face significant challenges, but as the Minister highlighted, this also opens up opportunities. There was some work done together with National Grid this year that has shown that the size of the net zero workforce will be huge. So almost 500,000 jobs between now and 2050. And we published a report with National Grid showing how equity, diversity and inclusion must be at the heart of the growth of this workforce, that actually greater focus on that will help, not hinder, progress to net zero. Our industry needs that diverse mix of skills and ideas, or it won't deliver the right innovation and leadership. And as importantly, the industry won't build trust and engagement with customers if we continue to be underrepresentative of the people we serve, especially at the top of our companies. And I think we also know that company performance and profitability rises with better diversity, including having more women in leadership roles. And just last week, BlackRock published more research showing that companies with the most diverse workforce outperformed peers by, I think, a cumulative 29% over 2013 to 2022 in terms of return on assets. So, I mean, the research keeps mounting. So I think I hope everybody does get the why of diversity and inclusion. But today's conference is going to ask if we're moving fast enough and investing enough in building and retaining this diverse talent. So if we go on, mid-career issues has been a big area of focus for us. And I think turning back to that, last year we published some research with Bain and company on the barriers that women face at middle management level in energy and how to overcome them. And I think it found that whilst D&I commitments and policies and programs are actually in place, there's a real delivery gap in terms of people being able to use them. That unsupportive cultures continue to hamper women's progress, and that women are really attracted to the energy sector, but they seem reluctant to actually recommend it to other women as a good place to work. And fundamentally, female talent is being lost. So I'm really pleased to see that the Energy Leaders Coalition, which you'll hear a lot more about today, and is the group of leaders we convene from 16 of the UK's largest energy employers, plus the CEOs of Ofgem and the North Sea Transition Authority, and I think many of the members are here in the room today. I'm really pleased that middle management has become a focus area for them this year. And indeed, today, they have published their first progress report on the measures that those companies are taking to cultivate female talent. And Chris, I think, is going to tell us a bit more about this shortly. The work is urgent because retaining the talent we do have is key. And in another piece of work, you can see up here that we've done this year, Women We Are Losing, which we published in September and shared with the ELC, we listened to the stories of a handful of women who have recently left their roles in the energy sector and told us the triggers that made them leave. And those triggers included feeling undervalued, with limited options to progress or contribute, an unmanageable work-life balance with not enough flexibility, an unsupportive and actually sometimes toxic working environment, including a macho culture, age bias, bullying, and a lack of genuine commitment to D&I. And whilst this was just a snapshot of some women's experiences, I think it is something that the industry would do well to heed. What came through in both these pieces of research, and what I really believe, is the passion that women have for working on the energy transition and finding positive solutions to climate change. The sector needs to attract talent at this critical time, but we can't afford to lose the talent that we already have because of culture. So if we go on to the next one. This is just highlighting the ELC, which is an initiative that we are really proud of at Powerful Women. So this represents a commitment at the most senior levels of some of the UK's largest NG employers to better gender diversity and inclusion within their own companies and within the sector as a whole. And I think it's also a really unique platform for leaders to share ideas, challenges, and good practice candidly and in a safe space. So today we're launching their 5th annual report, and Chris is going to tell us more, but I think the important point is how much we welcome their commitment, because leadership is really key to success. And I do believe that in this space, leaders can make a difference, driving their own company strategy towards ambitious and public goals, role modeling inclusivity to create a culture where everyone can thrive, and also influencing change across the wider sector. So the ELC is, I think, hugely important to progress. Next one. So final point from me, but I think it's really important to share not only what the ELC are doing, but also what we're doing about the whole topic at Powerful Women. So I really hope that our ambitious 40 by 30 target is going to give a sharper focus and drive faster progress. And as you saw in the video, we work to achieve this target, or to help achieve this target, in 3 ways. So we support, we challenge, and we connect. And there's been some fantastic work on this in 2023. Highlights of our year include a roundtable with the Minister, and I was very pleased to hear her say that she almost feels like part of the board. So we had a roundtable with her and with women working in energy. We've had a number of mentoring breakfasts which connect women and give them insights from women at the top. We've relaunched our ambassadors network, and our ambassadors act as advocates across the industry. And thank you. I'm sure there are many in the room or online. Thank you to all of you. We've again released annual statistics on female representation to keep holding companies accountable. But to support, we also share good practice case studies of initiatives that are actually making a difference. We collaborate with other DE&I networks for women and wider diversity, and we use events like International Women's Day to try and shine a light on women in the sector and call for action. We have a big campaign in the media and across social media to try and contribute to thought leadership and to challenge. And we also talk to the industry, including, and I think this is so important, including male managers, about why DE&I matters. And I would really echo Nick's comments about being so pleased to see a better balance in the room today. Last month, we were speaking at the Solar and Storage Live Expo, and in December, we'll be at COP28, making the link between female representation and action to address climate change. So I think we all have a role to play, and I'm very grateful to all of you, our keynote speakers, our panelists, our audience, for your ongoing support of Powerful Women and your engagement today. I hope you will continue to challenge us as well. I also hope that you're going to share the insights and ideas that you hear today back into your organisation and into your networks, and that you will join us as we push harder to improve gender diversity in the UK energy sector as we head into what is a special year for us, because 2024 will be our 10-year anniversary year next year. So thank you very much, and enjoy today.
Thank you, Katie. So you talked about the Energy Leaders Coalition there, and we did something a little bit different this year with the ELC. Previously, we rotated the chair through each meeting, which was great. However, this year we decided to appoint a chair for the whole year, and we're going to continue with that process. And I'm delighted that Chris O'Shea took up the mantle of being the chair, because I think it's really up the ante in terms of holding that group, including himself, to account. And I would say, and I think others would agree with this, the level of the conversation has upped significantly under Chris's leadership. Chris is also the CEO of Centrica, and I'm delighted that he's on brand for the Energy Institute in his trousers, which you'll see very shortly. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Nick. It is a little bit embarrassing in that the Energy Leaders Coalition is definitely a team, and I demonstrated that this morning. So, being the first permanent chair, we have some rules, which is you have to attend at least 3 of the 5 meetings in person. Because I misread my diary this morning, I had this lovely walk from my office down through Green Park and down through St James's Park, and I got a message from my assistant saying, "Georgina's on the phone saying, 'Where are you?' And I said, 'I'm just about to arrive.' It's absolutely fine, and I'm never early for anything. I'm doing quite well. Anyway, turns out there was an ELC meeting this morning at 8:30 that I was supposed to be chairing, my final one, which I didn't turn up for. So Georgina chaired it. We demonstrated the value of teamwork by Georgina chairing that. So I'm really, really embarrassed that I didn't get to chair my last meeting. But I think, now, am I going to be driving the slides? Is that the best thing to let me just see? Yep, perfect. I think I can. Excellent. So, Nick said, I'm Chris O'Shea. I'm the Chief Executive of Centrica. I've been involved with the Energy Leaders Coalition for probably 3-4 years now. There were some of you maybe here, you don't see your companies up there. Ask them why. The only reason I'm involved is, so see Rubina, who's no longer in Centrica, but was a colleague in Centrica. And when I was made Chief Executive, she said, I'm involved with this thing called Powerful Women. Would you be interested to have the Energy Leaders Coalition? And absolutely was the answer, because I have a passionate belief that, women make up half or slightly more than half of the population. If you don't have that representation in your business at all levels, how can you possibly hope to have the best team? And so Rubina just saying, would you be interested? Would you be able to do this? Is the reason that I'm involved in this. So if you don't see your companies up here, it might well be that your chief executives don't know about it. So don't assume that they do and they decided not to. Go back and ask them why they're not involved. But the Energy Leaders Coalition was established in 2018, and it comprises the head of 16 of the UK energy sector's largest employers. And between us, we represent around 2/3 of the workforce in the UK energy industry. Now, we're joined also by the CEOs of our regulators, Ofgem and the North Sea Transition Authority. And as such, the collective power of this unique coalition can also act as a really powerful lever for change across the sector. As well as challenging and learning from each other, we can play an important ambassadorial role with our peers in the industry and with other influencers. Part of the way that we hold ourselves and each other to account and also try to influence positive change more widely is by reporting annually on the work and the progress that we've made. And I'm delighted, as this year's chair of the ELC, to present our 5th annual report, which we published today. This year, the ELC has felt more energised, with CEOs attending more of the regular meetings in person, with some notable exceptions, and some very deep dives on both ongoing challenges and examples of good practice. I think it's really important to look at where you're not doing so well, but understand where you're also doing really well so that you can copy from your colleagues. Now, our focus on investing in the diverse skills, strengths and talent needed for the UK's energy future has seen positive results inside our individual companies, but also as a collective. Now, the highlights of the year and where I think that the ELC is winning are as follows. So, number one, the coalition continues to provide a unique and safe space for energy CEOs, who are also competitors in this market, to share, learn and challenge each other on what works and what doesn't when it comes to accelerating diversity and inclusion. Number two, collaboratively, we launched our first of its kind marketing campaign to attract more young women into our sector, and I'm pleased to say that we're going to dial this up in 2024. Thirdly, we meet other key commitments for the year, and we've worked hard to address the career issues faced by women in middle management in the sector in response to Powerful Women's research on workplace barriers in 2022. And the report published today includes an appendix with a full progress report on our company's work on this topic. And number 4, we believe quite passionately that transparency around data will help to drive improvement on diversity. And this year we've published even more detail on female representation at different levels in our companies, as you've already heard. And we're showing steady progress, but it is far, far too slow in my opinion. So let's start. I'll have a look at the data. Now, am I out of kilter on the slide? I'm a slide ahead, so I'm getting excited here, aren't I? You shouldn't really give me the slide thing. So this year's report shows the individual ELC companies' progress to 40% female representation on boards, in leadership and in middle management positions as at the end of September. The first chart is for the number of women on the board is measured against the FTSE target of 40% by 2025. And I think it's really important to say that should only be an interim target, because the boards should look like the diversity of population. We can see that 10 of our member companies have so far met the target for 40% on the board by 2025. This is the same number as last year. And we're pleased that 5 of these have achieved a 50-50 gender balance, which is what I think it should be. The average for the whole 16 companies in the ELC is now 40%, which is very good news, but there's still more to go. The second and third charts measure progress against Powerful Women's new target for women to occupy at least 40% of leadership and middle management positions in the UK energy sector by 2030. And again, we should look at this as an interim target. 4 of the ELC companies have already met this target for leadership, and 3 have done so for women in middle management roles. And despite the fact that few of the ELC companies have so far achieved this 40%, we can see that many of us are close, with percentages in the 30s. The average across the ELC is 33%, which is 1% higher than last year. And for middle management, it's 32%, and this is the first year that we've managed it, so next year we'll have comparative data. You see, it's clear that while the number of women in our companies is rising, it's too slow and we cannot be complacent. So the ELC has responded strongly this year to turn our commitments into concrete actions. And although it's not shown here, our report also features insights from the energy regulators, who are an important part of the ELC. As well as vocally encouraging progress across the industry, they've got impressive data within their own organisations. At Ofgem, women in senior leadership has risen from 33% in 2019 to 45% today. And at the NSTA, the North Sea Transition Authority, 48% of the workforce and 56% of the executive team are female. That'll be a huge surprise to you, but we don't always agree with everything that our regulators do, but this is one area where I think we can really learn from our regulators. As well as progress against sector targets, the report also tracks our individual progress against our corporate targets. And reporting on this publicly has been a major achievement of the coalition since it was established in 2018. This year, the majority of companies report progress against ambitious corporate targets for diversity that are more closely aligned to Powerful Women's 40 by 30 target. The commentary also highlights where companies recognise they need to remain focused, review their approach, or work harder in the coming year. So last year, we set 2 key objectives for our work as a collective. Firstly, we focused on attracting women into the energy sector to fill the tens or even hundreds of thousands of new green jobs that will be required to reach net zero. This area of work took the shape of a recruitment marketing campaign funded by the ELC companies and ignited by Powerful Women. The creative agency We Are Hydrogen was engaged to create a social media campaign to attract women aged 16 to 21 years old into the energy sector by raising awareness of various career routes and the opportunities that are on offer. It highlighted that there's never been a more exciting time to join our industry, with the opportunity to make a huge difference in the journey to net zero. Now, we launched this in January 2023, and the campaign had a specific emphasis on apprenticeship opportunities with a strong push during National Apprenticeship Week in February. The campaign brought positive results, and it was actually shortlisted in the UK Social Media Awards. And whilst not all companies were able to gather data on the number of applications that resulted directly from the campaign, one ELC member reported a 225% increase in applications from diverse applicants compared to 2022. The benefits are real. And the benefits of this collaborative approach to attracting more talent into the industry are very clear, and we've agreed to renew and expand the campaign into 2024 to influence students graduates, and career changers, and to improve our data gathering on the impact of the campaign so that we can learn from each year's campaign and make it better as you go forward. Separately in Centrica, we look at this. We've been recruiting more women into industry, and our oldest apprentice, the last time I checked, was 56. So again, if you're trying to promote our industry, don't assume that you have to have apprentices in their teens, in their 20s. You can retrain at any point. And I think that's really important because it's a very attractive industry. Now, it's essential, of course, that we also retain and cultivate the talent that we already have, helping women to thrive in our companies and the industry. And Katie spoke about looking at the talent that we're losing. Last year's annual report included the following commitment. We will step up our work to support the career development of women in middle management. This has been a regular agenda item at each of the ELC meetings this year, and it was sponsored by Duncan Clark, head of Ofsted in the UK. A detailed progress report has been published, and it's an appendix to our annual report. This work is in response to the two pieces of research from Powerful Women that Katie mentioned, looking at the barriers women face at mid-career level and why women might be leaving jobs that they love in our industry. The LC's absorbed these and responded with, firstly, a public commitment to act, and secondly, this year, actual concrete policies and initiatives in our companies that put our words into action and start to address the barriers that we see. There is a huge amount more to do, but it will remain a priority for the ELC, and we expect to start seeing results from this focused work next year. In the report, hopefully you'll find what we believe is a great set of good practice case studies where companies have chosen the policies or the initiatives that are making the most difference. Not just to women in middle management, but to women at all stages of their career. Now, a few common themes come out. For women in the early stages of their career, we see companies working harder to attract more women by setting ambitious targets and addressing bias in recruitment. We don't like to admit it's there, but it is absolutely there. One company has used a tool to remove gender-biased language in their adverts and their job profiles, and this has resulted in far better quality and more diverse candidates. More women's networks are also giving career support and offering positive role models to women early in their career. For women in mid-career who are having or thinking about having children, that's often a pinch point. We see improvements to family policies and flexible working, including the introduction of equal parental leave, longer paid leave for partners, and workplace support on fertility. One company's improvements to gradual return arrangements resulted in 97% of women returning from maternity leave last year, which is far higher than the average. You might assume that 100% of women come back. That is not the case. And then we look at women after they've had kids or when they've got other caring responsibilities. And we're seeing several new and improved leadership programs to help women climb the ladder to senior roles. And there's some impressive outcomes, promotion rates, which have gone to over 85% in one company. 85% of promotions have been women. There's several new initiatives on the menopause and support for those with caring responsibilities. So no matter what stage you or your friends might be at in life, the energy industry is absolutely for you. I'm pleased that we see so many new strategies to address workplace culture and to improve allyship and inclusion, which one company has linked to a 25% drop in staff turnover this year. The power of allyship and having men get involved is key to shift this dial. As you were saying, Nick, as you count the men that are here, it's absolutely important. We need to help women in the workplace. Hopefully one day it won't be somebody that's pale, male and stale standing up here as the chair of the Energy Leaders Coalition, but we do need to help to shift the dial. I'm also encouraged that so many companies are now working to embed their diversity and inclusion goals right into the heart of their businesses, with the leadership linking it to managers' performance and to the business strategy rather than having it as something that sits at the side and is an add-on. I'd encourage you all to take a look at these case studies. We've learned a lot from each other, and hopefully you'll pick up something as you look at these things and something you can take back to your own companies. So our 2024 theme is engaging the majority while spotlighting the minority. We know that a step change in the representation of those currently in the minority will not happen unless we bring the majority on the journey as advocates. We'll focus, therefore, on building our narrative on the benefits to everyone of greater diversity inclusion. How, for example, businesses perform better and the fact there's room for everyone at the table. Katie mentioned, but the data is there, it's incontrovertible. You cannot argue with it. More diverse companies perform better. So if people don't think this is the right thing to do as a human being, it's the right thing to do as a business leader that's trying to make money for their shareholders. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite external speakers so that we can learn from other sectors. So we don't just look at the energy sector. And we're also going to continue to share good practice. Although we're competitors, we are all committed collectively to improving this. And when you look at spotlighting the minority and the understanding that you cannot be what you cannot see, we'll work with powerful women to profile women working in the energy sector to both support those wanting to progress their careers and to attract new entrants. We'll run a series of webinars to share inspiring career stories and practical tips. And we'll expand our marketing campaign, Empower Her in Energy 2.0, into a more holistic 12-month campaign, linked throughout the year to key dates and opportunities such as GCSE and A-level subject choices and companies' recruitment campaigns. Our aim is to widen the reach of the message, sharing all vacancies in our companies that are suitable for young women. And as far as I'm concerned, that's all vacancies. There's no vacancy that's not suitable for a young woman. Now, we value the strong relationship and support that we have from the government, from Minister Soloway, and from the energy regulators, Ofgem, and the North Sea Transition Authority, who recognise the need for greater diversity and inclusion and for the future of our energy industry. We'll continue to engage with them and other agencies on discussions around green jobs and the skills that are needed for net zero, social mobility and affordability. The professional expertise of the Energy Leader Coalition's D&I Leads Forum is invaluable to the work of the ELC, and we'll continue to draw on their guidance and their support. Now, the CEOs in the ELC, and I think I can speak for them, could not achieve what we achieve without the expert guidance and practical input from our D&I Leads Forum, and we'll continue to be both informed and inspired by them as we go forward. And finally, we'll increase our ambassadorial role. We'll aim to leverage the convenient power that we have as leaders, the platform that we have, and as a collective, more powerfully during 2024, to engage others in the industry. We want to up our own game. We want to get better. We also want to drive real progress towards better representation of all kinds across the UK energy sector for a successful energy transition. So it's been a huge privilege to play a small part in the ELC journey as the chair in 2023, despite being partially absent for some of it. And I am really looking forward to continuing to support the Energy Leaders Coalition under our new chair, Alistair Philip Davis, in 2024. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for your fabulous leadership.
So to start with, I had a lot of questions, and then I got talking to my, in particular, my older daughter, who's 23, and she said, well, forget that. Let's ask the first question, which is, we're nearly a quarter of the way into the 21st century. How do you feel about the fact we're still having this conversation and we still need organisations like Powerful Women?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough. I've had the privilege of being in the energy sector for 27 years. And I've seen tremendous progress. Look at this wonderful room full of women from the sector itself. But we're getting to a really critical and pivotal point now. When we look at the big challenge, the big why we need to have urgency now, is we're a sector delivering, critical role in net zero, cleaning up our planet and creating a sustainable future for our generations to come. So like you, I've got a daughter, and this is huge responsibility for future generations. And what's happening out there, the challenge is getting bigger. Yep. Actually, the race to net zero needs way more innovation, new technology solutions, new digital platforms. It's not a silver bullet answer, a clear path forward. The rate and pace of growth and change in what customers need from us is substantial. If you just look at my own business, we've got investment up 30% because we know customers now not only going to rely on us for clean electricity to light their homes, they're also now going to use us as a fuel source to charge their electric vehicle. maybe even to heat their home with a heat pump, electric heat pump. So there's a big volume of change, a lot of complexity, and a lot of customer expectation on this sector. So now we've just got to get to what are the big moves? How can we get DEI off the side and into the mainstream agenda of all of our companies? And that's what the ELC and efforts like this seek to do. And we're really, trying to galvanise now the most of the sector to get there.
I think that there was a palpable frustration this morning when I was having some conversations in the coffee room downstairs amongst, again, the fact that we're still having this conversation and moving it along. We're picking up on that point, and also on something that Chris said this morning around, any board or organisation should reflect the society and or the customers that it looks after. Going back to this transition point, because now energy is becoming far less centralised and people are more participative. You obviously have prosumers, but everybody's becoming much more visible in terms of the energy usage and crisis. Companies like Jordan's, who will join us shortly, who are demonstrating everybody in their household can see their energy. Now that we're much more engaged, is it even more important we have, or you take advantage of the fact that there are far more women engaged in some of these topics, well, people generally, but women, of course, as well, that now we need to really bring them into the fold and get them engaged whilst they're interested in the topic, but actually get them active into the sector.
Absolutely. And that's why, Chris mentioned the really important campaign we've done on sector attractiveness and the range of exciting roles and opportunities we have within our sector, which is a little bit of a hidden secret to some folks. And what was really interesting, just building on the campaign that Chris highlighted, was the role that parents can take. And actually through that campaign, we had a parents' Facebook page alongside, very different channels for an energy sector to be using. Because also parents need to advocate, schools need to promote and create attractiveness, and we need to role model and lead the range of just fabulous opportunities there are within our sector. So the time is now, and I wanted to reference the Race to Net Zero report that was mentioned earlier, because if you haven't read it, please go and have a look. It's a report we did in collaboration with Nick. And it said there were three, really critical conclusions that because the journey to net zero is complicated, innovation, different perspectives, new solutions need to be found. So that's essential. If you want to be a provider of choice, meeting those new needs, DEI is essential to your strategy. The second point was, well, actually, one of the biggest challenges of the energy transition is getting all full consumer buy-in. You may be a new community hosting new infrastructure. You may be struggling to understand the interaction of changing out your heating system for a new electrical solution. So actually representation of your community and your customer base in those solutions is absolutely is fundamental. And then finally, it was said earlier today, we need about 500,000 new jobs. And we need to find those in a sector that's actually, been struggling to recruit because of the size and scale and the shift and the pace. So we've got to have the most diverse pipelines possible. And we all know when we attract a more diverse population and invest in inclusive environments, we get sustainable talent retention. So it's not on the side anymore. And actually to deliver net zero successfully as a sustainable and responsible company, DEI is in the heart.
It's a fundamental need. I mean, it's just simple maths. If we've got to find 400,000 people and you're only sourcing from half a population, doesn't take much to work that out. So let's think about some tangibles, because we saw today, and again, Chris just talking about some really brilliant strategies and initiatives which are going to be implemented across the LC. But often there's sometimes a disconnect between the strategy and the execution. You've been, as you said, for 27 years in the sector. More recently, obviously, you're more engaged in this topic through the LC. And National Grid are doing well from the metrics that we've just seen on this journey. What are some of the tangible things that you've seen implemented that you would encourage other companies in the energy sector, whether involved in the ELC or otherwise, that can quite quickly be implemented that are helping see these results? What are some of the tangibles?
No, that's brilliant. So, I do think data and targets matter. And actually, National Grid's met 2 of those 3 commitments already. I'm very, very proud to be of an organisation that commits to that. Why? Because we measure. We actually set really ambitious goals. So as Chris said, 40% target at the moment. We're 42% on 2 of the goals already. We've still got a bit of way to go with middle management, but we've already in our responsible business report put those goals up to 50% for women on boards and diversity in our senior leadership group. And we've already said we need to get to at least 35% by 2025 for middle managers. So, and that's embedded. That's not a number out there and then we dust off. What did we say in the last report?
That's the key thing.
It's embedded in each business unit. So the 6 business units supported by our group functions across National Grid Group in the UK and the US. And each business president has a personal contract with the CEO. And embedded in that contract is all of those diversity measures. So I'm targeted on diverse pipeline hires of at least 50%. Executive representation, and then within our grid voice surveys, is my organisation safe to say we measure how willing are people to speak up and speak out. We measure how effective our leaders are at creating an inclusive environment. So we have very specific indices that's linked to our performance and ultimately our pay. And I think that is really important. The other things we've done, and it's great to see some of my colleagues in the audience here, we've really committed to diversity, equity and inclusion as a strategic priority. So we have dedicated resources, both our global leads here today and our UK lead. So that means we get to bring in the best practices from other organisations. We're not afraid to learn.
Sure.
And we supplement the direct resource and strategy then with our employee resource groups, which we have fabulous representation from, which not only creates conversation, education and awareness, but for those colleagues, and I'm co-sponsor Women in National Grid, I've got some of my leads here today, it creates development opportunity as well as awareness raising. I mean, there's many things, shared parental leave. I could give you a number of examples.
Those things because, as I say, measuring is fundamentally important, right?
Yeah.
You need to know where you are. Where you want to get to, but measuring where you are doesn't actually move the dial. There are things that you are doing as an organisation which are actively moving the dial. You touched on a couple then. Perhaps 1 or 2 of the key things that you've seen that's really within a National Grid started to move those numbers along.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really wanted to make sure we had the most inclusive hiring practices. You know, getting people into the organisation when you're growing, you're net hiring every year. Really very tangible small things can make very big difference. So in terms of job descriptions, you know, we were writing almost for a subset of the population. So, you know, really, opening up the experience sets, the requirements, that has created a completely different insourcing and people applying. Blind application processes. So you take all sense of bias out of those applications. Diverse panels. So don't have a hiring panel that all looks the same. That's really challenged sort of group think on, attractiveness of an individual. All of those things have created a completely different set of experiences in terms of people thinking about National Grid in the first place, and then their journey through the organisation through to, getting offered a job. And that's really important.
I think it's really important to talk about because clearly the organisations involved are large corporate entities and very important because of the amount of people they employ. But there's also a lot of people hopefully listening in who are in maybe smaller organisations who perhaps are frightened off thinking that, change is dramatic and structural and expensive and all these things. And to some degree it can be. But there are some of these things that are relatively easy and quick to implement, like job descriptions, as you say.
Another one might be, do you invest in unconscious bias training? We've now created an online offering, a 30-minute sort of exposure to that topic. So there are very small but specific leadership interventions that you can make. And it depends really where you are in your journey, how mature and sophisticated you want to get to and what's your understanding of your population's need in that moment. We realised we had to create just greater and deeper inclusion, particularly for women sort of mid-career who might, choose to have a family, and then shared parental leave as a policy became just a must-do. Yeah. And again, write the policy. We offer 37 weeks shared parental leave, and then promote it. Remove the stigma of the husband, the partner.
takes it up.
taking the share. That makes a tremendous difference.
Touch on
Not
that.
too hard to implement.
No, exactly. And that's one of the key things I wanted to touch on as well, the cultural aspect, because we'll talk more in the panel around the hiring, because it's exceptionally important we get things right to get people into the sector. But the trouble is we're losing, as the report last year, sort of losing women in energy came out, that it's like filling up the top of the bucket and there's holes in the bottom.
Yeah.
So culture is fundamental to retention.
Yes.
So what are some of the things that you see already in place that are helping this? And you touched on this, people being able to stand up and say, I'm going to take this parental leave, or I'm going to speak up against and challenge some biases that I'm facing. That kind of culture where you can be recognised and feel comfortable to hold up your hand and say, this is a problem.
Yeah.
How are you seeing that sort of implemented, or what sort of challenges and also results you're seeing from people feeling more comfortable to do that?
Yeah. So I mentioned the important role of our employee resource groups and representing underrepresented groups in the organisation. So you can establish an employee resource group quite quickly, but to make it really effective, there's nothing better than having every executive member of your committee, your management committee, chairing and sponsoring one of those groups. The small act of every meeting that you hold, starting with an inclusion moment and an education practice. So there's very much from, I do believe passionately that leadership have a major role to play in role modelling and setting the expectation for what you want to see within your organisation. Now, if you're happy to also be really well represented in your group executive, which we are, 42% are female, people believe it, they can see it. So there's many ways to activate culture. But again, measuring the impact of inclusion in your organisation. So we now have a series of questions in our employee survey that specifically measures. I'm in a position in my job where I can challenge my manager, and they're willing to listen to me.
Which is great, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's again taken into organisations perhaps who aren't sort of well resourced. Is that it's not complicated or indeed expensive to have some of these anonymised employee feedback forms or mechanisms, which is fundamental to understanding, because we can all think, and that's the problem with groupthink. We'll think we're doing the right thing, but unless you actually hear it from those that are impacted, it's kind of meaningless a little bit.
Yeah.
So having that ability to listen back is great. You also touched on something about sort of linking to executive pay.
Yes.
Which again is a challenge, and always focuses the attention a little bit. So is that something which everybody's aware of, and it impacts at what level within the organisation?
Yeah, so we do have different layers of metrics depending on your ability to influence them. That's the right thing to do. So it's fair to say definitely the executive are most firmly on the hook across a range of those metrics. And I think that's a good thing, because if it's on the side and it's not part of a performance conversation, and it's not part of, therefore, a strategy of deployment, what gets measured gets done. Yeah. And I think there's nothing to be frightened of in that sense. And as I said, I'm really, really proud to work at National Grid, because I'm happy to take that challenge on. And as I said, some of those measures where I may not get paid yet, because we've got the big challenge of the middle management, that's fine, because it's going to spur us on. It's going to challenge us to be more creative. And that's why, I sit on the Energy Leaders Coalition for National Grid, because I just want to learn from somebody else. Who else has got the next best idea? And I think if we can lean into it like that, that this is just an opportunity set, and we'll all be better for it.
Right,
we will
floats all boats, right?
Absolutely. Aim high, aim high.
So looking at, I guess the question around the conference was, are we investing enough in talent and in energy sector? And clearly, I think nobody's going to argue that is the case.
Yes.
Within the room, much more to be done. So, going to get you to the blue sky thinking, in the sense of, if you walk into National Grid, you walk in, find on your desk a dusky old lamp, you rub the lamp, and out pops a genie, and she says to you, you've got the opportunity to have 3 policy or behaviour changes instantly across the energy sector.
Wow. This wasn't in the pre-read, by the way, so I'm really going to be riffing here. We had a fantastic dialogue with Minister Soloway and all of the wonderful leaders who are part of the Energy Leaders Coalition this morning at our 8:30 committee meeting. And we really got into inclusion is really important. Cultural inclusion, and that's really an easy phrase to say and very difficult to implement. And I can't credit myself with this quote, but somebody from our team said, diversity is about counting heads and inclusion is about making heads count. And so, I guess one wish would be, how can we work together as a sector to drive the highest levels of inclusion? Because I think that wins out in terms of it's just the right thing to do. It's just okay to have the most flexible policy. You don't have to have the excuse, because this or that. That's quite an outdated. I need flexibility because I've got to pick my daughter up from school versus I need flexibility. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's an inclusive environment. I need to feel valued. My contribution, I'm heard. Not because I'm a female and underrepresented, because I'm a human being and I want to bring my best self to work, and I can be when I'm included and it's safe to say. And, in one of the reports, well, it's not just women who want to work in a cool place. Men do too. We all do. Why? Because it's just the right thing to do. So I didn't give you 3, but I gave you hopefully a big one, which is inclusion for all on those broadest parameters, and not having to defend the why, but knowing it's the right thing to do and it's the most sustainable business and human practices you could envisage.
I think it touches on exactly what the minister said this morning. And I talk about this when technology works when you don't know it exists, and diversity and inclusion is solved when nobody talks about it. So how, again, you touched on some of those cultural inclusion things. What are you seeing, as I say, implemented? What do you like to see and suggest to companies? How can they get to this point when people do feel comfortable to say, actually, I don't need to give you an excuse. I don't need to talk about a medical issue or fabricate something. I can just say, I need this time, or I'd like to talk about flexing my hours, or I need to talk about whatever the issue is. How do we encourage that? Is it a case of just people being brave enough to stand up and say me first and do it and hope others will follow? Or can we as organisations really encourage that, more of that?
I mean, where we started was, can we have the conversation? Can we, through our employee resource groups, create safe space just to talk? At that point, no commitment, but can we talk and understand and learn and put each other, in different shoes and perspectives to know what it's really like? What that changed was then, actually, have we got systemic biases or gaps in our policies that actually creates a sense of feeling undervalued or not being able to move forward? And then there was a willingness to then engage on, are we willing to sort of make a stand on a policy choice and advocate for that at the most senior levels of the organisation? And then from that, if we were willing to buy into that, then how do we make it a reality? Because it's all great having a policy and you don't want it sitting on the shelf gathering dust. It then has to be brought to life. And that's the sort of role modelling, the commitment, the leadership intent. So we can all start through conversation and learning, create the safe space. I don't think it's fair for the most underrepresented with an issue to have to be on the platform, so create the safe space. That is just conversation. From that conversation, you're probably going to get some form of human connection and commitment to the issue. And that's when it can be a company policy issue. And when it becomes policy, you can start thinking about implementation, activation, and it just grows. It does grow from that perspective. And, we're many years in on this. And then you start to help each other too. So it's just a self-fulfilling, it just gets everything rolling.
I think it's interesting. I had on my podcast recently, Jojo Hubbard is CEO of Electron, which is an energy company. And we were talking and she said, I'm kind of fed up with always representing something. I'm representing women, or I'm representing people who've come back from pregnancy, from maternity leave, or I'm representing small businesses. I just want to be me. I don't want to always have to wear the hat that says, hey, look at me, I'm representing. And that sort of touches on some of the issues that came up in the why women are leaving the sector. I read that report, and I'm working in an executive search. People always tell me why they're looking to leave an environment. And much of those things applied equally to men as women.
Yes.
And I think I'd like to get your take on this, because clearly we do have to shine a light on diversity, gender diversity. I think there are other areas of diversity, and give it real attention and focus. But I think also we need to quickly get to the conversation which is about humans. How can we make, as you said there, a better work environment, whether you're able-bodied or a female or whatever your identity is? It's just a better place to be.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? Do you think we sometimes overtalk and strategize and measure? Because all of those things are important, but it's trying to find that balance where suddenly it's just a conversation, everybody's welcome.
Yeah, so measurement, to your point, needs to generate action. If it's a tick box, I mean, I think we're losing the plot.
Yeah.
And that, and your employees and your customers and your key stakeholders will see the lack of authenticity through a tick box approach. So data is important, measurement is important, but the action orientation and commitment around that is the real sort of genuine motivation that will make all initiatives and efforts thrive. And in the conversation in the ELC this morning, we said, we need to sort of aim high.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of ambition. We can't be a talking shop, so it has to be action oriented. And you've asked me very specific questions, which I thought was so valuable because it can be quite practical. There are many, many small actions that create great movements over time. But I think where we got to this morning on aiming high was that also it allows you to sort of say, well, if we get to that fully inclusive state when we have to feel we're still having to explain ourselves, I still have to represent women, then we have to have a longer term horizon.
Yeah.
Because actually to aim high and have that very inclusive future state I talked about, you have to go all the way back to where it starts at the schools, the conversations that you have with parents, the universities and the education processes. You have to have many activities align and programs come together. So it's incumbent on us all to aim high, to think long term, to get to those, really audacious ambitions that we set ourselves.
I think that's fundamentally important. But again, one thing, and you just touched on it, and I had a conversation with a number of people around the coffee this morning, was saying about these small things. It's actually the accumulation and compounding of many small things, just things like job descriptions. They're fundamentally important, but how you write your job descriptions, how your website looks when somebody from a different background comes and looks and sees a bunch of white guys around the table, as an example. On one client I had recently, we had to talk them through all of that. So some of those small things I think are fundamentally important. One of the other things I think about, and we touched on this morning, is that we are in a massive challenge to net zero, and you brought that up yourself. There's so much to be done. It can be overwhelming. How do we make sure that we leverage the diversity issue rather than ignore it because we're so fundamentally racing towards solving this big problem?
Well, that's why, sorry I keep name checking reports, but I do want you to read stuff that we produce as the ELC in collaboration, because in that net zero race report, which said this is, central to your strategy, it's not on the side. I think it's close to the last page, it gives sections of questions to ask yourself and your organization. Start understanding where you are.
Yeah.
And then you'll realize there's definitely gaps in the conversations and safe spaces for those conversations.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of information and insight already out there now.
Yeah.
How do you pull that into your organization? And how do you use that to support the conversations, depending on the level of maturity of where you're at? I think if you agree it's fundamental, then you'll be willing to start having more of those conversations. And be willing to say, we're not there yet. It's sort of okay. I'm okay to say, I haven't met my middle management targets. I'm not okay because I need to get there, right? Because it's the right thing to do.
But it's okay to say, I don't understand this topic.
Absolutely. I don't feel comfortable. I don't know what to do. Or this is a conversation that's just organizationally awkward right now. But, efforts like Powerful Women, Energy Leaders Coalitions, create those safe spaces to learn from each other, to accelerate that learning. It really is okay. What's the worst thing is to have the tick box and just sort of let it pass you by. Because I do believe that the most responsible, sustainable businesses will have taken hold of this agenda and with authenticity seek to drive that.
Very step.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that. So very quickly, we're going to move on to a panel session. So thank you, Cordy, for your answer so far.
for
You've still got
having
two
me.
more wishes, by the way. We'll get back to that at another point.
Great.
But thank you for now, Cordy. And invite my panelists, Jordan, Louise, Paul. Great to have you. Very quickly, if you could just, once you're seated, who are you, where do you work? So we've got your audience fully aware of who's on. Jordan?
Jordan, co-founder and CMO of My Energy.
Thank you.
Paul Patheroof. I work for Innovate UK and proud to say I'm part of a gender balanced leadership team delivering the Ofgem Strategic Innovation Fund.
Louise Parry, Director of People and Organisational Development at Energy and Utility Skills and also part of the TIDE Task Force Steering Group.
And my name is Adriana. I'm part of the European Power Markets at BNEF, Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and I've recently just stepped down as chair of the Young Professionals Network at the Energy Institute.
Congratulations.
I've heard from you.
Thank you all for joining us. Again, there's such a big topic, and I want to get back to talking about some of the fundamentals that we have seen and that we would like to see, because clearly we're not where we want to be. Adrian, starting with yourself, you're, relatively speaking, a newbie into the energy sector, obviously a few years in, but a few of us here are more grey and wise, or have the grey hairs at least. What are some of the things that you have seen in your few years in the sector that we could change or need to change to encourage more people from diverse backgrounds and from the sort of gender diverse workforce to apply for or get involved in the sector? Are there any sort of barriers that you've seen, or some things that you've seen that actually small changes could make a difference?
I have to admit I've had a good experience. I started my career here in the UK. I am, I guess, considered an early professional, started my career a few years ago. And I think the UK is taking measures and has done a lot to reduce, gender bias, even bias towards other cultures, such as, there's no picture on the CV, you don't put your gender. Those things still happen in Europe. In the UK nowadays, there's this whole process, and there's a careful process on the recruitment side. So you reduce all that bias.
Yeah.
Other things such as initiatives in the workplace, such as trainings, 360 they call evaluation processes within the company, where you have more than one person apart from your manager, evaluating you to progress. I think all those things really fight gender imbalances and bias that exist to this day, and that's why we're here. So I would say I've had a really positive experience. I do believe there's obviously improvements that we can take, and one point that I feel that I can't still understand why the UK hasn't applied is perhaps the fact that women, when they do have a child, why is maternity leave still a lot longer than paternity leave? I guess on a national level, there's on a company basis, you start to see, shared parental leave, and that's great. But at an initial stage when I'm applying, the standard idea is that, okay, this person can be away, I guess, 6 months, while the male version, the default idea is 2 weeks, right? But if you put that as equal, then the time of leave on a default would be equal. So there's no difference on the time they're going to be away if they have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 kids, and the same applies for progression, right?
Yeah.
So on a default, if this person, well, 2 people on the same level, if the default is that they will or they can be away for the same equal time, then I guess the two, competitors for a promotion, male and female, that output the same amount of work will be on the same playing field. Whilst if that's not the case, then the women need to run that extra mile, which I guess we've been running for a while. And I would say that's the main thing as a young professional thinking in the future that will probably put me a step back compared to my male colleagues.
I understand. Thank you for sharing that. One quick thing, you obviously joined an organisation called Arenco, who I just wanted to make the point and sound check them, because it doesn't have to be a corporate entity that takes good steps. When I started working with Rupert at Arenco, there were 6 people in the business, and they were fundamentally keen to make changes. So any size of business can get involved and start to do things. Thank you for sharing that. Pretty jump back to, because Jordan, you had a baby relatively recently. You can say it's nice and easy because you're the CEO and you can do whatever you want, or CMO, and you're a co-founder, but we know that it's not quite that way. How have you found that topic around the return to work and I guess some of the unsaid or comments that you receive or things that you see because you are, you know, a recent mother, but you're back in, you know, in working environment and proving your worth. But it's
Yeah.
almost like you have to apologize for that, I think, sometimes for the stuff I see.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you touched on some of that, you know, like being unapologetic about it. And I really struggled getting back into a point of leadership. Like, and my baby came early. I was in intensive care, so was she. So we had a little bit longer in our sort of like maternity leave than I anticipated. And when I came back, like, I very much felt like my own business had closed in around me, and I felt quite vulnerable. At some points, I thought, I'm going to throw the towel in here, like very almost quit. And like, thank goodness I didn't. I'm like a strong person, but also when you're going through like those chemical changes hormonally, like it took me a good 2 years. I don't think it's something that we talk about often, but after having Bonnie and after going through the trauma of having Bonnie and it being traumatic circumstances, you're going through a lot of chemical imbalances and you're not quite yourself. I often say that I felt like I had a veil over me where I thought I was myself, but I wasn't. And I was trying so hard to like keep up with my male counterparts and to mask it all and be okay on the surface, but I really wasn't. So I think just having, and also you mentioned it as well about, you know, the split time off. That only works if the entire country or world adopts that mentality, because if my husband couldn't have equal time off, he's in a separate business to my energy. So I've got this startup, I'm building this startup. He's in a big corporate. He's got his 2 weeks, and then it's me that's having to bend and flex and do everything. He's out at work at 7 a.m, back at midnight some nights because that's how the shifts work, and that's just expected of him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm having to like grow a business, handle this baby, deal with my own trauma and whatever I've just been through, and it's a lot. Like you get tired. So I think the fact that being able to share it only works when all organisations do it, because it's all right me doing that or implementing that as a business, but if I've got a load of women at work whose husbands can't share or partners can't share their time off, then it doesn't work.
It's more systemic, isn't it? Cordy, again, I think you've had some of those experiences.
On that, because we bonded over that first call, because it's also societal expectation of who's got what role. And it's still very, very much dominated that, well, the woman has the baby, so therefore she's the primary carer, therefore she takes more of the leave. Therefore, you know, when people need to leave early from work, it's the woman because she's, you know, versus those are all other than having the baby. All the other roles can be played by the male, but that is not seen as currently a winning role for men. And so, you know, my husband and I, we've got 2 children, 15 and 12 now, and we both had big jobs. And then 5 years ago, he retired, but he's one of the only guys on the school run. He's constantly not invited to the coffee morning because that's sort of a bit weird because who's this guy here? And so it's not really normal at the moment. And even if you've got a shared parental leave policy like we have, you know, we're sort of really trying to encourage the men to say, this is cool. We want you to, this is good for you. This is your opportunity to be at home, when necessarily it may not be seen in the current sort of social norms that is a cool thing for a guy to do.
I think it's a really good thing that Nick talked about this morning about the obviously more men here today, and just generally men being strong enough to stand up and take advantage of those things. Again, obviously you've had that, Jordan, yourself with a husband who's in a very sort of male macho type of environment, but he's been very comfortable standing up and saying, I'm doing the school and I'm taking over a lot of those responsibilities. And to have men able to say, actually be not afraid to stand up and sort of put themselves up there to say, I'm taking advantage because I want to go and spend more time with my child, or want to go and be more flexible, or even look after a parent, or, you know, it doesn't have to be all about children, of course, but being more comfortable to not be the stereotypical here from 7 till 7 and aren't I great kind of culture that we've still got a little bit of, I think.
If I can just add to some of that, I think some of the challenges we see here start before the workplace. So if you have, you know, people who are considering the career they want to go into from school or university, and they're thinking, well, I might want a family later in life. Where do I want to try and focus my career? And if they're seeing this, you know, perception of this isn't a great sector to be able to be a parent in, it makes it difficult for us, then it puts them off. And for me, I'm sure we'll come to talk about it, one of the major issues here is that funnel of people that want to be in this sector generally. And these are the kinds of things we need to address.
Definitely, definitely. Well, we're with you, Paul. Let's talk about, because obviously in your role, you see a lot of technical innovation, you see a lot of business model innovation. What innovation do you see, or would you like to see around this topic area about how we can entice more women into the sector and keep and maintain them and make them feel comfortable? And let's get to this point where we're not talking about diversity, but what initiatives or what sort of innovations have you seen or would you like to see?
It's a massive issue for us. So we're on the periphery. Well, we work very closely with energy companies, but we also work very closely with innovators who are trying to deliver something in this space. We see a couple of barriers. One is not enough innovators want to get involved in the energy sector, certainly from the regulated lens that we look through. And even when you look at those innovators that do want to get involved, there's virtually no women, and that's really sad. And I think one of the things that one of my colleagues is here today, I've got a few powerful women in my team who are in the audience, pointed out is that for the 2050 targets we have, we need some really radical technical innovation.
Yep.
And the people who are working in the tech space just now will be retired by then. So we need to make sure that we are encouraging the talent of the future now to be part of that journey. And I don't think we do enough.
Yeah.
One point on that, there was a graduate and apprentice engineer show last week in Derby. There was dozens of companies there. It was almost like a recruitment event. 1,700 students, 2% were women, and none of the companies there were energy companies.
Right.
That's where we need to do something.
Yeah. Let's pick up on a little bit more. There's somewhere I'll pick up with you, Jordan, on that talent thing. But Louise, going to yourself again in the work that you do, what are you seeing, or what would you like to see that's going to move the dial forward in terms of skills and talent and attracting people? Not necessarily. I think we often talk the topic around the sort of the leadership team, and obviously that's fundamentally important. We get the board mix right, and then we get the executive leadership right. But there are a lot of women who would want to work not necessarily at that level, but want to work in the sector. Blue collar work, for example, touching on something you touched on there, Paul, about encouraging women to be able to, it's comfortable if you want to be an EV charging installer or a solar panel installer, what it might happen to be. So what are you seeing? What would you like to see to have more impact or more women coming into the sector right the way across the strata?
Well, it's important to look in the first place at the skills that we need. So energy and utility skills sort of says what we do on the tin, but working with power networks and green jobs delivery group, when we look at the skills needs we need by 2030 and beyond, we're looking at mechanical engineers, we're looking at commissioning engineers, we're looking at civil engineers, we're looking at digital. So that doesn't make the energy industry unique, because the water industry is looking for that, adjacent industries are looking for that.
Yeah.
So we've got to really demonstrate, it's really encouraging to see the results of the sector attraction platform, the diversity of careers that are available. And certainly in the conversations I've had over coffee, people would enter with one role, but see a career that's really diverse. It's not that you join as an engineer and stay as an engineer, and people don't even come in with an engineering degree, but end up being an engineer. So how can we talk much more about career pathways, talk about those career opportunities? The data that we've seen from powerful women about women that are leaving energy and utility skills, we have an inclusion measurement framework. So we look right across that employment life cycle. And even at the point of application, so we've got a similar jobs board, but for the energy and utility sector, we can see about 46% of the visits to that jobs board are from women.
Right.
Only 22% of applications are from women. So women are looking at joining the industry, but then going, where's the job for me? Is it in the job descriptions? Is it in the shift patterns? Can they not see someone like them working in the organisations? And then as we look across that employment life cycle, similar to the data that we've seen today, encouragingly, we can see more and more women on development programs, leadership development programs. We're seeing that increase in women in leadership positions, in middle management. But what we can also see is that women are leaving at higher rates than they're represented, and higher rates than they're recruited in the first place. So we're attracting women to work in the industry, but they're leaving. So where are they going? And taking some of the feedback from that report is really important.
I'll put back on that, because that's really important actually. But just touching with Jordan for yourself, you're at the forefront of the energy transition, and you're also fast scaling and sort of hiring at speed in a location which isn't necessarily the most populous. So how are you? It's lovely in Grimsby. How are you dealing with that, trying to make sure that you are inclusive, out of necessity, of course, but also out of, I know it's your passion as well. So how are you coping with that fast growth, leading edge kind of thing, and yet also trying to make sure there's diversity amongst all of your other challenges?
Yeah, just it's a scramble. I'm not gonna, it's just my brain's like scrambled egg. It's so hard. And I'm glad that you touched on the geography part of it as well, because we're from Grimsby, it's a northern town. It was predominantly fishing that it was left behind years ago. We're not really got the skills in the area or the love in the area for people to even have an ambition that they could get into this industry. People don't even know what this industry is. It's like, so there's what we're actually doing is just leading by example. The fact that we even kept our manufacturing facility and our HQ in Grimsby shows the dedication that we've got to the area. And I am such a firm believer in like the ripple effect and leading by example. And if we can do something in an area like Grimsby and put a market leading UK business there, it brings so much hope to the local area and gets so much engagement, and particularly with the young people. So we just try and do whatever we can to get in front of more and more eyeballs, more and more young people, lead by example. And I think, having mine and Lee's superpower, and one of the reasons why the business has been so successful, I feel, in the secret sauce is the 50-50 co-founder. It's a life hack, female and male founded business, and just having somebody for the local area to look up to from a male point of view, from a female point of view, seeing how it's working, seeing how it's been a success, getting engaged with the local schools, doing tours around the factory, showing them what engineering is, showing them what marketing is, showing them how to, from design to a real life product, then showing them influencers using the product because you speak in their language. There's so much that we're doing that's just, there's so much more we could be doing, because it's a fast scaling business and you don't get everything right firsthand, especially when you are scaling in an area like Grimsby. But I think just lead by example and do what feels good and right at the same time. We're not a data run business at first. We weren't. We were a gut feel business, and then I think that needs to stay a little bit in there. That empathy, that human approach, inclusion. I'm so glad that you touched on the inclusion. It's all right just ticking a box, but if they don't feel included and part of the journey, you won't retain them. So just lead by example.
Yeah. So standing up and so Paul, go ahead.
I was just going to say that gut feel bit's really important, because it's because you're a representative of your consumer.
Yeah.
As a breakdown.
Exactly.
And what we all need to talk about is the fact that we are still not representative of the consumer. And that's a global issue.
Yeah.
Global issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things, if you look around the boardroom or the meeting room or the Zoom call, if those heads don't represent the communities you serve, you've got a problem. And too often we don't recognise it is that simple, really, I think, many levels. Louise, picking up on something you said, I'd like to get the thoughts of the panel as well, because you touched on a statistic there that you had about 46% of women were looking at jobs, but only 22% were applying. What are some of the things that we can do as an industry to actually just tip that balance? Because, in terms of people looking, that's almost, parity. So how do we move that dial forward? What are some of the small things that we've seen and can do to increase that people who apply? I'll come back to you, Louise, because it's your question, but Cordy, if I get your thoughts on that as well.
I think it's a really good question, and back to the human aspect. I think Chris said in his speech earlier, if you can't see it, you can't be it, and showcasing all of your female role models in all these different types of roles that you mentioned is something that we've done as National Grid, and we've committed to as part of the Energy Leaders Coalition for Industry Attractiveness.
Yeah.
So just making this industry a lot more accessible and demonstrating people are already achieving in these roles. I met Fran a couple of months ago. She's another of our female overheads line person. She's not one of many, but it's the start. Like that can happen. That is possible. So I think we've got to be showcasing role models, showing accessibility of our industry. That's a really important feature of attractiveness, because I think it might tip you over in that confidence level to say, oh, I can apply because I can see someone like me who's doing that job.
And that's something quite simple to actually shine the light on those individuals, as you say. Ariana, obviously you've been through this process more recently in terms of applying. What things could you see that would make, and going back to the point, sort of make more people move from looking to applying?
Definitely representation plays a key role. I have to admit, I do I guess, identify perhaps a lot more, even within the workplace, with a female leader than a male. It's just a fact. So having that diversity, I think, that definitely attracts. Even if you don't have that diversity, I think, and taking on a few points that they've been saying, I think it's good to have this conversation amongst women, but with men as well, and have them lead by example, and just humanize a bit the senior leadership.
Yeah.
You know, we're all professionals, we're all managers, but we're also parents. We will get there eventually, and I think just obviously not get very personal on your day to day at work, but just normalize that those things exist. And even, you know, if you're a male but you're discussing with possible prospect candidate that is a female, just normalize that, you know, there's a difference, you might be away, or, you know, I might not be able to support you in such a way, but I have colleagues and you will have that mentorship inside. Just normalize that conversation.
Yeah.
And make sure that men are also skilled with you know, the necessary argument, fact, or they know what is out there to support a female, even if they're not capable, I guess, to give that mentorship in such a way that perhaps a female can, I guess. So it's all about making everyone aware in the workplace that there's this diversity and put everyone working towards it.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. Just want to put a point on that, because I think one of the upsides of COVID was the fact that we saw a bit of each other's lives as humans, and that you did have a kid coming and banging on your shoulder, or maybe you didn't put your makeup if you wear makeup, or you didn't have a shave if you shave. It made people a bit more aware of that, and I think we need to carry that forward, that we are all just humans doing a job. I think that touching on that point
really helped in that regard. Obviously, it was a tough period, but I think in the terms of humanizing people and professionals was great.
Yeah.
And I believe we're carrying that forward. I see that in my day-to-day. I don't know if that's the case for everyone here, but I think we should continue, you know, to remember those days. And I still have that. My manager actually works quite a lot from home, and I see the kids. I say hi, I speak to them, and he's my manager, but he's also the father of 3 kids, and he's a great example in that regard, right?
That's the example exactly you said. People seeing it, so you can see that I've just got to go and put the dinner on or whatever it is, you know, that
and he's not afraid to say, I'm sorry, I need to take care of the younger one, he's sick, and he takes a day off, and he's an example of someone that, you know, invests in fatherhood. Like I guess traditionally women have invested in motherhood.
Thank you. I think we might be running short, so I want to get some more thoughts across the board. Paul, from your own perspective, how do we get this, how do we make it more welcoming and more receptive to women to come into the sector?
So for me, I think we have to start with the women that are in the sector, and it's all about behaviours. We need to, coming back to the points that have just been talked about, somebody in my team said to me that women need managed differently. And I thought, that doesn't sound right. When they explained that, I started to understand what they meant. And it's around coaching, cultivating them as team members. And statistically, you know, women are more likely to suffer from imposter syndrome, are less likely to put their hand up in a room that's predominantly men. And part of our role as leaders is to work with our team and help them through that.
Yeah.
And only because they're the ones that become the role model for future women coming into the space. And I think for me, that's something we need to focus on.
Thank you, Paul. Jordan.
You nailed that. I was invested. I think I ain't got any more to add, because I feel like everybody's covered everything. What was the question?
It was around
Women need definitely managing different. Men, what is the saying? Women are from Venus, men are from Mars. We're completely different entities, and that is.
Do you think sometimes that's difficult? Because we talk about, you know, equality. There's sameness and equality aren't the same. We're not identical, but we're just equal. Do you think sometimes there's a perception that we have to treat everybody, going back to Paul's point, everybody has to be treated the same? And actually, that's not the case. And it's not just in terms of gender, it's also ethnicity, it's age groups. There's lots of ways that we're different.
Yeah, we're so different. And I think it's just understanding each other's differences. And I hate really talking about strengths and weaknesses. It's more about like attributes. And you know, there's exceptions to the rule, but I think just accepting that we fundamentally run very differently, and that's okay, and that is good for the consumer, it's good for the workplace, it's good for everything. It just drives good business if we accept that everybody's different, and that is true inclusion. Sorry, I would.
I'll just bounce off that, because valuing difference is this journey we're on together, and that's great. Being different is cool. Not, oh, I have to be like that to fit in with that. We're going on this journey where maximum innovation, creativity is needed. So actually valuing difference and embracing it and allowing it to thrive is really, really important. And then I think, male allyship is quite critical, right? Because we're all part of this conversation. We all need to be included, and we need male allies to activate the change that maybe we haven't seen in certain sectors or subsets of our population. So this is a broad conversation for everybody. And that gets back to that sort of big mantra about if we include because it's the right thing to do, if we recognise difference and we come together to solve it, I think, it will happen.
To go forward more quickly, isn't it?
Your husband wasn't invited to the coffee mornings. I'm not invited to the golf club. I think there needs to be something like this. Sorry, not a little boys club. And we need to stop the women's club, and we need to be talking more.
We talked about attracting women into the sector. Clearly, as we've already highlighted, maintaining and keeping and retaining women into the sector is also very important. Louise, again, just from your perspective in terms of what you're seeing and the skills development that we need to see for women to make sure they stay and grow within the sector, what are some of the things that you're seeing or you're being challenged by?
Well, we're certainly already touched on some of them. We're absolutely right. Research does show that women will look at a job profile, they'll see 10 things, can't do 2 and won't apply. Men will see that they can do 2 and apply. So how can we encourage
Just one usually.
events like this? So access to networks, to be able to build networks. Women, by lots of research, again, we're not very good at building those networks. Certainly in my career, I've benefited from sponsors.
Yep.
And being put on projects I remember not wanting to be on, and actually being really upset that I'd got seconded to this amazing project. But you look back and think, actually, that's made a fundamental difference to my career. So we're all the sponsors, allies, providing access to networks and supporting women to build their networks. But it's also looking much more on the whole person, the attributes that an individual has, rather than we do seem to necessitate that they have to have energy experience or they need to have X qualification.
Yeah.
So what can our selection processes do to really facilitate that progression as well? And also, whilst not advocating that we have different development programs for women and different development programs for ethnic minorities, how can we ensure that we have diversity in that leadership development? So whether that's reserving places for women and diverse talent on those leadership development programs too.
How can we implement some of these things into smaller organisations? Because it's fantastic work some of these corporates are doing, but again, they're often more resourced than a smaller entity. But again, so many people are either working already or could be working in this energy transition, not necessarily always in a corporate environment. So get some thoughts in terms of what are some of the things we can do around this allying and standing up and being counted and showing that level of support is universal, whether you're a 5-person or a 5 million sort of size scale of business. Paul, some thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, I think the business and financial pressures for smaller companies are very different to some of the utilities and large energy companies we're talking about. But I do think utilities and large energy companies can take a lead in where we try to go. One of the things that jumped out at me on the slides from this morning was just a very quick data thing. I'm a numbers guy, and I don't have all the data, so apologies if I'm jumping to conclusions. But over the last 10 years of this, the leadership and senior management positions grew 3%, 3%, 3%, 5%, and then 4, 3, 2, 1%. And what that says to me is that the growth is slowing because we don't have enough at the grassroots. We're not bringing enough women into the sector across the board. And I think if we focus on leadership and senior management, we're going to, we might miss a trick here.
Or we're bringing them in and they're leaving as well. I was at a discussion last week where EDF are building the pipeline for Sizewell, and they are already talking to primary school children, because those primary school children in 10, 15 years' time are going to be their apprentices, their graduates. So how can we start the conversation a lot earlier?
Conscious, we really are wrapping up for time. Sorry, but we've still got some wishes from this genie that she's granted us. So very, very quickly, what's one thing that you'd like to see change that can be done quickly to move the dial forward? And who should we start with?
Well, I gave my wish before, but this absolute focus on inclusion and not needing to justify it.
Yeah.
But I'd add to that then getting the best practices adopted, no matter what sector. And then a commitment from senior leadership.
Thank you. Jordan?
I think I'd like to see a little bit more of London leaking out into the rest of the country, especially up north, because there's a whole talent pool up there, or people that don't even know that they're a talent pool yet that could be unlocked. And I think they're so disconnected from the city. So I just think if, especially the large corporates and the people in leadership, if you can get out and about into small towns, bigger towns, cities up north, you'd actually get a lot of value from it and see what's going on.
Also, that there's actually some of the issues, there's less diversity outside of London quite often, just because it's less normal.
Exactly, it's the unconscious bias. Yeah.
Cool.
And one thing for me, I think women are a underrepresented characteristic within the energy sector, but within women there are various subsectors of underrepresented groups, and what we should be trying to do is make sure that we have the most broad appreciation of how we can help women, not just women that we currently see. You know,
Yeah. Thank you. Please.
It gets harder as you get along the panel, but definitely in inclusion as a whole. But what we see in this room is the industry coming together. So how can we come together more as an industry to really drive change, but also to collaborate and share best practice and learn from each other?
And just have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll do plenty of that later. Ariane, I think.
Well, if I had one wish, well, I touched on this point earlier, so I guess balancing that play field between men and women and setting, I think a good step forward, and baby steps obviously, would probably set, as I said, maternity leave and paternity equal. And I do think the backlash of that with time would be a more gender balanced workforce. And I know this is a big ask, but I had one wish.
Good. Now, you're not released just yet because we're looking for some more questions from the audience. So if you're watching on the live stream, you can participate by looking at the QR code on the screen for contribute your question or contribute towards the questions. And we have some microphones in the audience. So if you do want to ask a question to one or all of the panel, if you raise your hand, we'll make sure a microphone comes to you. And nice and simple, we have somebody there. And forgive me, I'm partially sighted, so if I mix who you are or what gender you are, forgive me.
Name's Katie Jackson. I work for Statcraft. I'm currently 8 months pregnant, so really excited to hear this discussion. And I just wanted to share that I think it's really important to think about 50-50 or sharing isn't necessarily the same for every person. So when I had my first maternity leave, I took 3 months off. My husband had 9 months so that I could go and do a master's. Now I'm going to take 9 months and he's going to do 3. So I think it's different in every situation, no matter what you need. But just going back to the comment earlier about not wanting to represent pregnant women right now, I've got a question that's nothing to do with that. So I really appreciate the discussion around the business case versus just saying this is the right thing to do. And I feel like here we're kind of talking in a room of the converted. So what I'm interested in is when you're out there not talking, everything you've said has been fantastic, but that's not all being achieved. It's not all being accepted by the organizations. So how do we get past just the business case? Or is that what you're having to use to say this is the right thing to do? Let me sell it to you in numbers. Or how do we get people more on board with this is the right thing to do? So just wondering how you convince the unconvinced.
Thank you for that question. I guess to some way it doesn't matter as long as we get to the end result, but it's a good question. I'll try not to sort of go along the line, but I will share with you first.
So there are different populations who may buy into this or not. I think that is a acknowledged challenge in our industry and sector. And so one of the ways we've been looking at that in National Grid is bringing those discussions together. So there's lots of discussion in office locations that seems to engender, a convergence of ideas. The further you get out into our operational depots and fields, they may not be touched by some of those conversations. They may be turned off by DEI as some sort of corporate thing versus the very reality of being in a depot and a field force where you still value things like being included, like belonging, like looking after each other, because obviously we're in a high consequence industry where safety is paramount. So we're starting to take the conversation to those groups to unlock where there is convergence. And what we found is people value being educated and aware of what's going on, and they really value being respected and belonging. And so maybe we can bring more of these conversations by not having too much corporate speak about DEI and targets, but having some more real conversations about what does this mean to me, and therefore what creates a moment in time for me to want to be involved and to commit. And actually, when I do that, I see a lot of engagement. In fact, in Inclusion Week, National Grid hosted its first ever call for all field operators and operations personnel, which is our control rooms, our contact centres, and then all our engineers in the field. It was the most attended call of any call that week. I got bragging rights because I got to part host it, and it was nothing to do with me organisation. It's the ladies I'm looking at in the audience. But 1,800 people wanted to learn and share. So I think we've got to meet people where they're at and find those common grounds to bring a commitment and a way forward. It's not easy, and some people feel disenfranchised by some of these office conversations. So we've got to find those points of common ground. And again, it starts back to creating the safe space where we can all learn from each other.
Well, we're going to come to you because you're a data guy, but just want to reflect on some of the questions. I'll ask some of these in a moment, but there was a few questions here around the difference between, I guess, data and empathy. Not the difference between, but the balance of those things, which kind of touched on there. So again, what are your thoughts and answer to that question, but also how much is there a need for this, the right thing to do from a human perspective versus actually financially, bottom line, it's the right thing to do?
I think it's an interesting question. The data gives us that analysis piece, but to get the real insights, you've got to go qualitative. And that's, speaking to people, understanding. And I think we can join that to the point that was made. Congratulations, by the way. The know better, do better, I think is the term that's used. And often, I think everybody in here will have witnessed mansplaining and lots of nods. There's a duty on us as leaders in an organisation to call that out, but also we just need to be mindful about how we go about things. Sometimes behaviours, people aren't aware of the connotations they have, and it's just about education for everybody. So it's just making sure that we know better, do better.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I think the Gen Zers and the millennials are going to make this happen anyway, because I think they're doing a great job at literally making sure that the old way is, because I often talk about this culturally, the old way versus the new way. I think they're doing a great job at actually demanding that this is the way forward. So I champion that and champion that they always shine a light on us. And then as business leaders and as startups and as whatever, just don't rest on our laurels. The times are moving so fast. We're in unprecedented times. None of us know what's right and wrong. It's just everything's moving so fast that I think we've just got to continually stay engaged, continually look at policies. Don't just put it in place because it was something that you was taught in an old corporate business that you put in years ago. Let's innovate around policies and procedures and stay active and in the conversation.
Well, let's stay on that theme because one of the questions came in and it was an anonymous one saying, advice for energy startups. If you had a 20-person company, what would you do to ensure inclusive culture and attract diverse candidates? So we'll start with you, Jordan, for obvious reasons, but I would like to get perspective of others as well. So.
Absolutely honest, I didn't worry about those things in the initial stages. I actually just wanted to survive and get the business growing. You don't have the luxury of stopping and thinking, well, hang on a minute, what's the division here and what's this? It's only as you grow and as you start to see or you learn from your mistakes that you start to be able to, make change. So I think as a startup, you're just doing the best you can to bloody get by. So just as long as you're conscious of it and as long as there's an intent there, I think you'll remain authentic.
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, there's lots more questions. Are there any more in the hall before we go back to online? There, if we can grab a microphone and to challenge you to either pass along or if you can just quickly say who you are, where you're from, and your question would be great.
Yeah, so my name is Kelly Lovesey and I'm from Opus Energy and I also chair the DRAX Women's Group. One of the biggest challenges we have is how do we not create more intersectionality when we have these groups? So for women, we have women who could sit in 3 or 4 colleague resource groups now for the different things that they represent, and they're exhausted. So I wondered if you had any tips or hints on how do we be truly inclusive and not create a lot of subgroups that just become exhausting for people.
Louise, I'll come back to you. Louise?
Thing that we all have in common. So we're a safety critical industry, and at points in our lives, we will all have issues with mental health. So whether that I had a little bit of that postnatally with my middle daughter, whether that's trying to juggle caring for children, caring for elderly parents, or whatever it might be. I think the data's 1 in 4 of us at any one time If we put mental safety at the same level as physical safety, I believe we start to change the conversation. So when we're talking about each and every one of us and the challenges that we have, that can also engage the vast majority, which is our white male workforce. But it is also recognizing that it's a very different experience if you're a woman and a parent, if you're a black woman, or if you're a woman with different social mobility. So looking at us all, the one thing we have in common is mental health. So I would encourage that real drive on that being as critical as physical safety in the industry.
Thank you, Louise. And we also have a comment on that question.
Just in relation to being involved in groups and how you're interacted with, it shouldn't be an addition to your day job. Getting your input to how organisations develop should be built into your job description to what you'd expect it to fit into your normal day. And I think push back on employers that expect you to take on roles that are outside of 9 to 5 or whatever your flexible working pattern is.
Thank you.
Do it as I spoke to a few people in resource groups, they're doing it on top of the day job, but not given any more time to do it. And so how can we really invest in those resource groups?
Just one practical example we did quite recently is actually bring all of our employee resource groups together on a call to talk about a thematic issue so that we could look at it from multiple lenses and perspectives and representation. And that's quite, I think, a practical way to allow, underrepresented groups to discuss and have a safe space for their specific issues, but then bring together where there's intersectionality on these combined group calls. So it's a thing we're sort of constantly looking at is how do you bring groups together as much as, allow clear representation of the issues for those minority groups.
We had a question from another anonymous source, but asking around something we touched on there around normalization of these policies. And again, was asking the question, should we or do we push flexible working, for example, and some of the things that we think are diversity orientated to men specifically, just to get this normalized? Any thoughts on whether there's almost like I'm not quite sure how you would frame that, but focusing on men to almost get them to the point of accepting that this is normal for us all? Does that make it easier, or does that actually just become a little bit counterintuitive?
I think it's a good point, and I think it should be discussed more. It goes back to the joint parenting thing and the joint caring thing. It's about societal changes. It's also about us individually. I know I put a lot of the bias on myself. It's not like even that I get it from external sources. I've got to do a lot of deprogramming myself. So I don't know if it's just, I don't know how we do it, but I think definitely we should be encouraging or accepting that if men want to work more flexibly or part-time as well, that should be welcomed. It shouldn't even be a question, really. But yeah, I don't know.
Your thoughts? Sorry,
It's very much flex first now, isn't it? That's the legislation. It's how we can really change the conversation to make that happen in our own organisations, and a lot of that will be role models. I've seen senior male leaders that will talk about, I'm going to parents' evening, or I've got to go and pick my mum up from the hospital, and having more of those open conversations, which goes back to culture ultimately.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a question from Eamon. Do women really need men allies, or is it a case of men need educating? Ariane, I'll leave that hot potato with you for starters.
Sometimes I wonder if male just would wish to just be able to take that persona that we not only men, we all play when we're professionals, right? We need to be on point, we need to be always there available, but again, we're also all human. Things happen, you need to pick up your parent to the hospital. Unfortunately, these things are part of your life, and sometimes I wonder if that macho culture is also affecting men in a way. And if we have that conversation and just normalize it, if we start from the top, the senior leaders, as an example, take time off, or openly, promote in a company, or are open communicating that I actually need to be off on Friday because of something, then that I will escalate to the younger generations, both male and female. And I guess it'll be easier then to go to your manager and say, look, I actually need to take some time because of X, Y, and Z. And I wonder if men would also like that pressure to be taken out of them. I don't know, that's actually an open question, so happy to discuss it after. Yeah.
Great, let's flame it, because there's a few questions around this topic actually. So In terms of having male allies, is that helpful or not? And if it's helpful, in what way? Maybe if we frame it that way. Paul, I know you're the guy first, so let's be.
I think in answer to your first question, it's both. I think men absolutely need educated. I think we have a responsibility if we want to be used to be allies to do that. I'm conscious you're getting in the way there, so. But I'm going to put a little bit of challenge back to some of the female leaders in the room, is that female leaders need to step up as well, because not always do we see the behaviours that we should from them, particularly in encouraging women in the workplace.
But I'm told we're wrapping up for time, so there's lots more to talk about, and there'll be much more this afternoon with the workshops. And of course, I think we've got some great networking over lunch where we'll be available for some further conversations. But if you give us a round of applause for the excellent panel. Thank you very much for your assistance. Do we deal with this here, or is there Georgine is going to tell us what to do next. Thank you.
The next panelists are welcome.
Straight up. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will introduce myself. My boss was meant to introduce me, but I'll introduce myself. So what that means is I may say some amazing things, but please just, allow me. My name is Yewande Abiose. I'm the head of strategic partnerships at the Energy Institute, and it's really an honor to be here today. I'm really excited to see Maria, who was with Powerful Women. Amazing to also see Grace supporting this, and also everyone within the Powerful Women's team. Thank you very much for having me today. Georgina, thank you. While I'm introducing myself, I just came from a flight. I landed about 5:30 from Lagos, Nigeria. What you're hearing is lack of sleep. So if I'm not making sense, just smile. I probably will wake up. So yes, Yewande Abiose, I'm head strategic partnerships at the Energy Institute. I've been with the Energy Institute for more than 11 years now. I started my career as an energy consultant with Deloitte. At the time, I was an auditor, moving around different companies. And from Deloitte, I moved on to Total. But before I go on about myself, please note there's an amazing keynote address that's going to come with my session, and I'm going to introduce her in a second. Georgina, I might have gone the wrong way around, but I've already given my disclaimer. Yes, so after after Deloitte, I moved into oil and gas, and I did internal audit with Total. After a while, life happened. I started having too many boys, and I decided I was going to move into not-for-profit, and here I am at the Energy Institute. And it's really been an amazing journey. I've had the opportunity to meet different people from different spheres. When I think in diversity, it's always very exciting for me to see what that means in different parts of the world. This time yesterday, I took part in a women's session in Lagos. Yesterday, yes. And it was on a theme called Old Boys Network, Myth or Reality. And yes, and it was a debate. So we had a male and a female do that, the for, and then a male and a female do the against. And it was such an insightful conversation. So if you want to hear about it, I can speak to you about that lunchtime. So yeah, still introducing myself. Yewande is amazing. And now I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker for the day on behalf of my boss, Nick Waith. Eleanor, I met online during our conversation for the session, and for me, I was just in awe. I'm sure you see that soon, but for me, it's the passion, the passion about the work she does with Noon. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me Eleanor Miles, founder of Noon.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all today. I'm Eleanor Mills. I'm the founder of Noon. That doesn't really tell you very much about what it is I actually do. So my little slide popped up before. So I call myself a recovering hack because I spent 25 years at the Sunday Times. Some of you may have read my columns or my interviews from when I was there. I interviewed everyone from Sheryl Sandberg to David Cameron, who's made a comeback. One Direction to the Dalai Lama. I was the editor of the Sunday Times Magazine. I was the editorial director of the paper. I jumped on a journalistic wave when I was about, when I left university, and it carried me beautifully till just before I was 50, when I got spat off it, and I became a founder. So I am a 50-year-old founder. Actually, we're the largest demographic of founders in the UK, fastest growing load of people starting businesses. And I have created a 40,000 strong community of midlife women who I call queenagers. I reckoned that we really needed a rebrand of this particular bit of the spectrum. As a mainstream editor in national newspapers for 25 years, there is a definite male lens that the media puts on society. It becomes not a truly reflecting mirror, but a distorting lens, because women are always seeing themselves through a male point of view, and that becomes particularly so when we get the double whammy intersectionality of gender and age. So gendered ageism is where ageism meets sexism, and it's not something that anyone was really talking about. So I set up Noon because I could see that there was this huge kind of void in the culture where midlife female voices should be, the queenagers. It's beginning to change. I loved Helena Bonham Carter talking about 56, I'm reaching my prime and my power. We also had Michelle Yeoh at the Oscars, who was the first ever Asian woman to win an Oscar in her 60s. And she said, ladies, don't let anybody tell you that you're past your prime. So this is a sector that DEI usually forgets. So the bit of DEI which is usually left out is age. And I think this is particularly pertinent to the report that you've been hearing this morning about women leaving the sector, and to the big challenge that you as energy companies are absolutely front and center on around net zero, because that is one of the huge challenges facing us as a species. The other thing which is massive and not so much talked about is longevity. So I'll come back to this in a sec. So as a society, we're an aging society. There's a brilliant book I encourage you to read from some professors at the London Business School called The 100-Year Life. And in The 100-Year Life, 50 is only halfway through. And we are, our generation are quite likely to live till we're 100. So I called my organization Noon because in The 100-Year Life, 50 is like midday. And yet companies, particularly, and society more broadly, have not woken up to the fact that we're all living and working longer and what that's doing to the population. And it's massively important for businesses, particularly for net zero, because it's particularly older women who are driving behaviour change. And keeping women in the over 50s in the workforce is a massive government priority now. And it also really makes sense for businesses because the queenagers are driving huge amounts of spend. So, hang on, let me go back to the... queenagers are behind 93% of all household consumer spending decisions. Forbes magazine calls them super consumers. When I went to interview Sheryl Sandberg just before the pandemic, I had a lovely time going out to Facebook and wandering around the campus, which looks a bit like Slough, kind of the IKEA there. It's got that same kind of reflective glass. It's not really as glamorous as you might think. But anyway, Sheryl was lovely. It was just before she left too. Big queenager pivot. And she said to me that women 45 to 65 are the most underserved and lucrative cohort in the whole of the marketing firmament. So someone on the panel earlier touched on consumers. My queenagers are huge consumers of your product and making the decisions about which energy supplier they're going to have and all that kind of thing. And they're also huge drivers of changes in behavior. Lisa Edgar, who's the head of insight at Saga, talks about how women of this age are the key drivers of behaviour change and they lead the men. So why this matters is because we are sitting on a new queenager phenomenon, and they are new. So we've always been a pioneering generation of women. In 2019, women over 40 started to earn more money than women under 40 for the first time ever. And that matters because in the early 90s, so when I joined the Sunday Times in 1992, I was one of many women of my generation who entered the professions and the working world in equal numbers to men for the first time. We had 50-50 representation. There were actually more women going into law and medicine and entering corporates than at any time before, and more than men, and often going in with higher qualifications. And I've been writing about women and leadership, and I've been a member of the 30% Club steering committee, and I've been banging on about this for about 25 years, and everyone kept saying to me, it will change, it will change kind of naturally. As women get older, they will move into these management jobs and they will become leaders. But that has not happened. So I feel really passionately that the Queenagers, we drove so much social change around parental leave, all the things we were talking about on the panel, on being kind of, combating sexism at work, gender pay gap, all those kind of things have been really driven by Queenagers. And yet this last bit at the top has remained elusive to us. So if you look at the last Cranfield data for the FTSE 100, we're stuck at about 12 to 14% female executives. So that's proper women with pulling levers, with agency, as I used to call them when I was a journalist. And that is not changing fast enough. So what I do now, the reason I'm really interested in Queenagers is because I think that there's a massive misunderstanding within corporations, about the value of Queenagers. So we've heard a lot about role models, how you're trying to bring more young women into the industry, and they look up. If they look up and they don't see any women that they'd actually like to be, then it's a complete disaster zone. You have to have within your organizations some more senior role models who women look at and think, I want to be there. But what people are not understanding about the Queenagers, and it's not surprising that they don't understand because we are this pioneering cohort, is that we're hitting midlife with a very different set of challenges from any generations before us. So over half of us are the main breadwinner. And we just did this big piece of research with Accenture, my company, noon.org.uk, which is a platform for women in midlife. And I do a newsletter every week called The Queenager, which goes out to my whole kind of community, which is all about these issues. And we did this big piece of research, which is basically looking at what Queenagers are facing. So over half have survived divorce, bereavement, redundancy, coping with elderly parents, teens in trouble, health issues, financial crises, more. Yet companies, I think, are not really thinking about the issues that women at this point are facing. There's a huge, huge focus on maternity, how we get more women back after they've had kids. But there's no point in doing that in terms of your leadership pipeline if they all leave between 45 and 50. So I was just interviewing Hanneke Schmitz, who's the global CEO of BNY Mellon and also the global chair of the 30% Club. And she said to me, we're seeing a second brain drain, what I call a Queenager brain drain out of jobs. And you've heard that today. I mean, we've heard it in exactly the research that you've seen this morning. And so this is the kind of consumer power of the Queenager, which most brands are really not thinking about. But if you're a business, you need Queenagers not only because they're representing huge amounts of spend as your consumers, but also because they will allow you to create the kind of aspirational pipeline within your business, which might mean that you hang on to more of the women that you're so desperately trying to attract. So sorry, I haven't got very much time, so I'm going to spin through this quicker than I normally do. What we found in our research is that flexibility is 16 times more important to Queenagers than status. So when I was made Saturday editor of the Times, back in the day, I was given a huge office next to the editor down on the first floor. And I was like, I really don't want this office. I run all these supplements. I want to sit with my team. I'm used to like sitting on my desk and see the designers' screens. We're always in a huddle. My way of managing as a woman was very, you know, on the ground, kind of with the team. And I was like, if I'm downstairs, it's just going to I'm going to spend my whole time wandering upstairs so I can talk to people. And they were like, no, but this is a really serious bit of real estate, you know. Well, what do you mean you don't want the Saturday editor's office? And I said, well, you know, actually, I don't want the Saturday editor's office. And then I came in the first day and they were like, would you like your car to take you for lunch? It's like, no, I'm going to be nipping out to the canteen for a sandwich with my team. So I really understand that thing about the flexibility being more important than the status. And for me, that completely encapsulated the old way of thinking about management compared to what queenagers like me wanted as they became senior within organisations. And we're seeing a real kind of crisis around that. So our research really looked at what queenagers want from employers. Which of the following do you consider indicators of success in your working life? You can see 82% a good work-life balance, making a positive contribution to the organisation I work for, how valued my employer makes me feel, being part of the team, being proud of the organisation I work with. And then we see that again, the thing I think is really interesting is the one at the end, being able to make a real difference, this shift into purpose. So it's about flexibility, autonomy, being a sense that they're really valued in doing something proper in the organisation that they're in. And I have to say, as someone who's been a senior woman within a very big global corporation, there comes a point, I think, in midlife where you just get a bit sick of having to be like really kind of polite and pleasing when somebody tells you something that you know is rubbish, you know. And, you know, I'd won a lot of prizes as an editor. I was really, you know, I had the biggest revenues on my magazine. I knew what I was doing. And so to be gainsayed by, I'd say, a new chap who'd come in or someone who didn't know what they were doing, I got a bit sick of having to be pleasing about that. So which is one of the great joys of running my own business. So it's a big laugh from the audience. It means you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the reason we're seeing the queenager brain drain, which is this real problem which we've got now of the lack of women sitting. We've got some women on boards, that's up to 40%, but most of them are non-execs. They're the kind of golden skirts. You know, they're lovely. They're doing a great job in many organisations, but it's not the same as having your hand on the lever and running the P&L. And that's why we've only still got 8 female CEOs in the whole of the FTSE 100. And on the current trajectory, it'll take another 136 years to get to parity. I don't know about you, but that feels a bit long. So this also really matters because queenagers are the canary in the coal mine for your broader diversity. So if your organisation can hang on to queenagers and has set up the kind of things that they want, if you think about the values I just said the queenagers want, autonomy, value, purpose, flexibility, that's an absolute dead fit with Gen Z and the millennials. So if you can hang on to your queenagers, you're much more likely to be hanging on to the kind of diverse strategic talent that you're all trying to recruit. There's a massive intersectionality in this, of course, because if posh white women like me aren't getting these big jobs, you're certainly not going to get them if you're a, you know, young black woman from the wrong side of the track. So that this kind of multiplies up. And they're also absolutely key to being the kind of role models that make other women, as we heard earlier, look at when they're applying to your organisation, think, oh, look, they've got quite a lot of senior women. And younger women know that if companies have got lots of senior women in senior places, then the culture of the company will be different. And that's there in all the kind of lean-in statistics. Senior women, 68% more likely to mentor and bring on young, diverse talent. That's Sheryl Sandberg's research. And so one of the things that I'm doing, so I now run this community of queenagers, which is fantastic. I love it. I've just written a book which will come out next year, which is all about queenagers. And we're doing this thing called the Queenager Way with a new, we're just launching this, but we've got a group of about 4 companies who are incubating in the first one of these. But this is all about how do you really hang on to your queenagers? What do queenagers want? How can you give it to them? And by doing that, you will reduce your gender pay gap, reduce groupthink, which means reducing risk, and inspire the next generation of women. So we do a whole thing around making the Queenagers in your organisation feel seen, because over half of, actually it's more like 60% of women of this generation feel completely invisible, both to their employer and to the world more broadly. So my mission is kind of multifaceted. I'm trying to change the narrative that we have in society about the later stages of women's lives to something more positive. Older men are seen as silver foxes, aging like fine wine. You know, it's all that George Clooney thing. Older women, not so much, more like peaches, one wrinkle and we're put in the bin. And the only women that we're shown within the kind of media lens, and the media is the worst for this of all sectors. I'm not giving you a particular bollocking. But the the media are really bad. So the only older women you're allowed to see are ones who look like kind of Amanda Holden or Helen Mirren. There's about 3 or 4 older women who are deemed kind of acceptable. Miriam Margolyes because she's funny. But we don't see within our culture normal Queenagers doing their thing with agency, and the Queenagers are pissed off about it. So we're getting a bit of menopause chat. That's the beginning of the Queenagers roaring. But actually, 78% of my women do not want to be seen through a menopausal lens. They don't want to be in a kind of, they want doctors to know what they're talking about, but they don't want to be put in a hot, sweaty kind of, hot flush kind of zone, particularly not when they're just really angling for a big management job. And it's quite interesting to me that the only thing the corporate world's really done about this Queenager cohort is give them menopause chat, which is actually quite useful if you're the men circling the wagons, because it's like, oh, well, they're a bit hysterical and sweaty. They're not really management material. So I think we need Queenagers not walking hot flushes, and we need more Queenagers in power and in management, because that will shift the dial for the next generation. It will also help you attract more of the kind of customers that you need and help us all get more to net zero, because the Queenagers are really fired up about climate change, because they've got, they're looking after children below and adults around, so they're elderly parents above, so they're really engaged with the kind of issues of the world. So I'll shut up because I'm sure I've gone on far too long. But basically, we need to reevaluate the role and the necessity for your organisations to have more Queenagers at the top. And you need to start talking about them, loving them, supporting them, understanding their pinch points, and most of all, retaining them within your organisations. And I'll leave you with the final point. Do any of you know, and there's lots of DEI HR people in the room, do any of you know, are you measuring how many women 45 plus have left your organisation? Because often that's the bit of data that people don't have. When I go into companies and I go, right, let's do a diagnostic, they don't even know how many women have gone. So there's a huge kind of quiet quitting going on. And then the women leave and they set up their own things. Because the other thing about the Queenagers is they have agency. They can walk with their feet. If you stuck out in a corporate till you're nearly 50, you've got resources, you've got a hell of a lot of gumption and resilience, you can go and run your own thing. And so the women are walking, voting with their feet because they don't feel that companies are understanding them or giving them the support that they need. So if you'd like to hang on to your Queenagers, get in touch. I work with a woman called Dr. Lucy Ryan, who's just done a brilliant book called Revolting Women, which is all about why women are leaving. And we'd love to come and help your Queenagers stay. Sorry, this is I'll stop. There you go.
I did tell you her energy is amazing. So well done. That was fantastic. Thank you. So I'm just going to invite my other speakers to please come on stage as we begin our conversation. For those that do not know, the session is on how other sectors support diverse workforces to thrive. So yes, my speakers are coming on now. I'll introduce everyone as they sit. So we're joined by leaders from these diverse fields. I think one amazing thing about having Eleanor do that speech was also outside of the sectors, also the diverse demographic. So she's representing a sector and at the same time, a sect of kind of women. So I'm really excited. A cohort, I like that. That sounds posher. Yeah, so next on is Anna Lane from the dynamic world of banking and finance, very special world also. We also have Carol Rosati, and she's from GSK. We have Kate Rosenshine providing perspectives from tech. She's from Microsoft. We also have Catherine Murdane. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Murdane. You're very welcome. And she's joining from Matalan. Thank you very much, ladies. I would like to see everyone's faces. So if it's okay, can we like sort of like slant in a way? Yay, that's amazing. Okay. Um, this plans to be a very interesting session, and I did that introduction about myself intentionally, just sort of explaining how I moved from different worlds, from being a consultant where it was just me and my laptop, going to different organizations, speaking to them, trying to understand their vision, trying to understand the way they work, seeing how they react and act with women, to moving to a very male-dominated, especially in the part of the world I was in, which is Nigeria, a very male-dominated world of oil and gas, and just seeing how women are being treated and dealt with. Moving on to then working for a not-for-profit in an organization that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Grace, I think there's 50-50 in our organization at the moment. So we are championing this, which is amazing. And for me, that's already in itself sectoral, but then jumping out completely to like different industries. And I'm really excited about this because during our pre-conversation that we had, everyone had so much to say. I think it was supposed to be for an hour, but we just went on and on and on. In fact, I was like, event is over. But then one thing we just sort of like agreed on was the importance of speaking to three structures: how we bring, build, and retain. And I think that's a great way to sort of speak to everyone here on. I have just 3 questions, and I'm just going to say, please chime in. You just hear me saying chime in, chime in, chime in. So please allow us to do that. Just to set the tone a bit, we're going to start with the bring concept. With all the different industries, we want to know how do you even attract women into your sector? Some sectors are a bit, if I can put it, sexier than others, while some others are just, it's almost like no girl zone. And I read a report, Harvard Business Review, saying that a diverse workforce boosts innovation and brings about creative problem solving. So companies that excel here often have a deep understanding of the different cultures and communities, which helps them tailor their recruitment strategies. And this is not just by ticking the box, because, again, you speak to some organizations, and when you say diversity and inclusion, what are you guys doing about it? The first thing you hear is, we have a department, right? And you're like, it's great. And I know a lot of you here are probably in that department, but I think what we want to hear is different. Speak to the fact, this is where we are now. We're not where we would like to be, but this is where we plan to be in a couple of months or in a couple of years. And I'm sure my speakers here would definitely delve into that even further. So yes, I think my first question goes to you, Anna. Considering the finance sector being traditionally, male-dominated, particularly in the leadership role. And I think Eleanor sort of touched on that too. So how is your organization and your structure in itself innovatively attracting younger women, women of color, and what success stories can you tell us today?
Yeah, great that finance gets to start this one. So we've got the worst gender pay gap of any industry, including construction. So let me just sort of backtrack to who I am. So I'm Anna Lane. I am the president of Women in Banking and Finance. We're a non-for-profit. In fact, we're a social enterprise. We've been going for 43 years. When Women in Banking and Finance was launched back 43 years ago, there was one senior manager that was a woman out of every 50 men. So women just weren't represented as a sort of a group within finance. Fast forward to 2023, we represent about 27% of senior managers, well, actually sort of senior leaders in financial services up at the director level. So progress has been quite slow. What I would say, so my background is asset management and wealth management, and that's technical parts of finance. So I am now an entrepreneur, just like you. But what I would say is that it really varies in finance. So where we see great progress is around things like building societies and retail banks. So they have very good stats around 50-50 entry level of men and women. They've done a really great jobs with organisations like Career Ready, looking at socioeconomic mobility. So we have the worst socioeconomic mobility of any industry. So 90% of senior managers in financial services are privately educated, or they come from backgrounds where they have parents who are from professional backgrounds. So we have to work very, very hard as an industry to look at how we're actually addressing that, not just because of the societal challenge, but actually because it's all the bright minds at the table that come up with better, not just products and services. You talked about the consumer, Eleanor. I mean, the fact is that financial services exist to serve society. And if you have whole swathes of people that don't represent society, then it means you're not going to have, the most innovative products and services. Also, the existential challenge that's climate change needs financial services at the table to be able to fund innovation. But if actually all of the minds, so you talked, I saw the panel before talking about groupthink. This is so important. So when you talk about attracting talent, it's working in some areas, but not in the areas like investment banking, private equity, venture capital. So less than 2% of all venture capital has gone to female-founded businesses over the past 10 years with no improvement.
It's got worse since COVID.
It's got worse.
It's 1%.
Now, last time I looked around, God didn't just give out brains and innovation and creativity to just one section of society. So is it any wonder that our UK stock market is in such a muddle? Now, it is very expensive to list there. It's very, very true. But when you think about innovation and creativity, so what we're trying to do as an industry is to look at how we're going to change that. So unfortunately, we, like energy, are highly regulated. So the government's having to get involved. So we've got the H Women in Finance Charter, which is something that people sign up to try to enforce getting more senior female representation. But we've also got our regulator, which is the Financial Conduct Authority. I've got a consultation paper out at the moment with the Bank of England and the Prudential Regulation Authority. So what that will do is we'll look at mandating proportional representation of women around things like listed companies, authorizations. And I think that's really, really important, because although we are looking at, and I could talk you through all sorts of things Women in Banking Finance do, where we work with, charities, and we work with schools and all of that. At the end of the day, in finance, if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. So it's going really well. What can you learn from us? Regulation.
I like the idea of the consultation and the program that has been set up. That's obviously an intentional move to do something about it, and I think that's amazing. I'm just going to ask Carol to do the same. Introduce yourself and then just speak to this question, please.
Thank you. I'm Carol Rosati. I'm the UK lead for GSK. I also sit on a couple of boards and chair their REMCOs, so I see things from different angles. Sounds confessional. In my past life, I used to be a headhunter for 20 odd years. Hi. I had an epiphany in 2007, because I used to recruit CFOs, and I realised that all of my clients were men and all of my candidates were men. And if I saw any women, it was probably an HR person once or twice a year. And as a consequence, that sent me on a different journey of my career, and I ended up creating a network called Inspire, just before Powerful Women. Actually, it was I was there at the start, to help women network, because we're really bad at it. And I took it global, and it gave me an insight into so many different cultures. What it did for me is it took me into DEI, but I come at DEI from a slightly different angle in terms of for talent management. How do we attract, how do we retain, and how do we make sure that it's good for everyone? I will always be in the gender space, and I've seen some progress in the last years, But we have, and I'm a very proud green ager, but we have some way to go. So when I came to GSK, one of the first things that I did is actually look at the current status quo, which actually is very good. And we have, for the first time over this year, we've got a positive gender pay gap. Yay! For women. And by 2025, we will actually have 45% of women in senior roles, which is awesome. So for me, personally, great place to work.
You have a female CEO, don't you?
We have a female CEO, we have a female CFO. But that's not to say it's perfect, because it isn't.
She gets a lot of grief, your female CEO.
She does get a lot of grief.
It has to be said.
She does, and she's only one of the 8 or 9 that so long way to go. So I come at it from a slightly different angle in terms of one of the first things I did is came and asked really awkward questions, like okay, you've got 4 ERGs based on race, gender, LGBTQ, disability. What do you do together then? Because for me, it's not, when I first started talking about diversity back in 2007, I very soon became aware that lots of eye rolling and, oh, okay, I need to start talking about inclusion so that I actually get people what's in it for me. Something's in it for me, okay, I'll start to talk about it. I've now gone a step further in terms of, okay, intersectionality. Woohoo, let's have a conversation about that, shall we? Because, human beings, somebody talked about human beings, we are multifaceted. We're not just a woman. We're not just of colour. We're not just, so for me, it's all about making it better for everyone. And it's not just about HR policies. I do sit within HR. I am not an HR person. Don't get me started. And I think it is a business imperative. But we need to actually get people to join. We need to make it attractive for everyone. And one size doesn't fit all. We need to understand who our buyers are. And somebody was talking about Gen Z, for example, or Gen Z, or whatever it is. And they do want different things. They want to make sure that your culture does sing for them. And people throughout their careers, it changes. Your needs change as you go through life. So we need to be very, very sure about how people want to experience their work.
Follow-up question for you, and it's HR related. There's this thing that they do, where you say, you're not a good, that person's not a good fit, they're not like us. Like, what does that mean? But I get it. But Carol, can you speak to that? Because the idea of saying your organization has a culture, and because of that, somebody doesn't fit, isn't that a problem in itself?
Yes, it is. And we go beyond that in a way, because we have something called the code. I know it sounds corporate icky, but it is more about the ingrained values of the organization. So it doesn't really matter what kind of size, fit, shape someone is. It's more about their mentality. And it's all based around because let's face it, a bit like financial services, if we get pharma wrong, it affects everyone. We have to have a positive influence on our patients, which is everyone. So we can't have that. We can't say one size fits all, because it doesn't. And I find it abhorrent.
Okay, that's a good point. Sorry.
Although the pharma industry has for years only looked at male bodies, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
And male mice too.
Yeah.
So all the drugs are tested
All
on
the
male
drugs
mice,
are tested on
not female mice. Yes.
And GSK
I'm
was
going
the
to
first
jump
one.
to Kate now, if that's okay. Kate.
Sorry, we're going to start, aren't we? Sorry.
My panel's energy, as you can see, is high, but I have to increase mine here. Kate, is it okay if you please just introduce yourself and also speak to the question at hand?
I'm Kate Rosenshine. I work at Microsoft. I'm actually a molecular biology PhD dropout, so I can explain about the mice situation later if that's of interest and the history behind that. But I've been in tech for the past, since I pivoted. I think that's what it's called. And I currently am at Microsoft. Obviously, tech has come a long way. I lead a technical team. They're far more technical than I am. I'm tech-ish, I like to say. And I have seen the change. So I think I'm not going to use a buzzword, but let me use a buzzword. I think with all the sort of change in, how people interact with technology, moving from something that was very physical, if you think about it, early on, to something that's more cerebral. I think now with AI, buzzword, there's a lot more need to exercise judgment, right? To understand principles, logic, and I think it's a lot more, there's a lot more opportunities. Like I've seen more and more women come into tech, like me, from the girly sciences of life, life science and biology, because we have a strong background in data, in statistics, in research, and sort of understanding like hypotheses and how you build, how you build a case. And I think one of the challenges I've observed is how to get, more younger women to understand how to, how to think about their transferable skills. I think those skills are super important for any data practitioner, and data is the basis of AI, and AI is super popular right now. But I think that just has opened the doors for a lot more women to come in. I think representation is super important. Like being a female leader, I know that if I reach out to a female candidate, potential candidate, and tell her, why have you not applied to the job in my team, to the opening, there's a higher chance that, they will do it. There's a higher chance that it will attract more, women, whether it's for me or for, the periphery around me. And I think that can't be undervalued, because for me, like I can't, like most meetings I'm in with customers, I'm the only woman still. So
Fantastic. Thank you for that comment. And we're still on Bring, by the way, how we're attracting, right? Sectorally. And I was speaking to my sister, who's a Gen Z, before coming. And, I was like, would you like me to ask? I always do that because it's a way of also calming my nerves down when I have to speak. And she said to me, tech bros. She's into tech or trying to get into it. And that in itself already says, like a friend of mine did a post and she said, I'm so excited. She's starting a tech business and she's like, I've become a tech bro.
Yeah.
But that in itself is the problem, right? And how do you address those? It seems little, but it's a bias.
It's not only that, it's also, if we're looking at startups, early tech companies, it's who gets funding.
Exactly.
Right? And right now, I think 10% of funding in the UK, I need to check this, but I think 10 to 15% of funding goes to companies with one diverse senior. So
it doesn't
not
help.
great.
Yes, yes, of course. Thank you for that. Though, Catherine, we're coming to you now. Can you please introduce yourself and speak to the theme on attracting women into your sector?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Catherine Muirden, unabashed queenager, I think, in this panel. And I'm the retailer on the panel. So I'm currently the Chief People Officer of a retailer called Matalan, which is a value retailer. And I'm part of the team that have gone in there to be part of the turnaround. Prior to that, I was part of the turnaround at the Co-op. I was the people director of the Co-op's food business, and prior to that, I spent many years in retail, Marks and Spencer, John Lewis, you name it. In my hobby life, I'm also on a couple of boards and chair a couple of Remcos, and I've spent a long life in retail and in business supporting women, and I think I created the first diversity and inclusion the Marks and Spencer first diversity and inclusion training session in 1992. And I remember a man turning to me and saying, why are we doing this? That was after I'd sat in a panel reviewing a laundry range, which was demonstrated by women and decision made by men. And that was a kind of turning point for me. Anyway, I guess the thing about retailers is that retailers always start with the customer. So, or good retailers always start with the customer. Start with the customer in mind. Think about the customer. Make them the heart of everything that you do. Put them at the heart of your business. Focus on them. Speak to them. Listen to what they're doing. Listen to how they're behaving. All of that kind of thing. And therefore, as a newly arrived person at Matalan, I am currently lining up my recruitment strategy along with the profiling of my customers. That attracts people to retail. We don't do badly in retail. You know, I have a female, a woman CEO, a woman chief customer officer, a woman chief retail officer. So we've got a 50-50 board. And part of what attracts people to retail sometimes is the product, because they are a customer and they like the product, but also because there's a mindset, a cultural mindset within the organization that means that they are being listened to. So my CEO, Jo Whitfield, was the CEO at Co-op. Surprise, surprise. I got a phone call and she brought me in. And I'll walk around and say, like, so you're new here. What brought you to Matalan? And they'll say, well, Jo. Oh, right. And what about you? Why did you decide to come here? Well, I heard great things about Jo Whitfield, so I thought, and that becomes part of because she's setting the cultural norms for the organization. I think the other thing that attracts people to an organization that is run by a balance of women and men is that, I always say that culture, and I do a lot of work in culture change, that culture is born out of customs and habits. So a country its culture is born out of its customs and habits. A town or a city has customs and habits that form its culture. And our job when we go in as leaders is to make sometimes tiny changes that mark something. You've broken a custom or you've broken a habit, and it marks something that tells the prospective employee, oh, well, it looks and feels different round there. It might be the personification of the person, that's the people that are leading, but it might be it's also the things that they do that change what I call the TNTs, the tiny noticeable things about a new organization. But retail, like the energy sector, is a broad church, and although we can be proud of that ONS statistic about our balance of women on boards and in executives, it looks healthy on the surface, but there are subsectors, for example, in the grocery industry, which is still dominated by men. And one of the things that we did at Co-op was we set up a group, a bit like this group here, called Grocery Girls, which has been going for 5 years now. It was set up by my CEO and has fostered young women's careers in the same way as this group and organization seems to do here. So I think that, we're not perfect. We're on a journey, very much so. And I've been brought into an organization that hasn't changed much since the 1990s. So I've got lots to do. It's very exciting. Our youngest employee at Matalan is 16. And our oldest employee, any guesses, is 86. So I think one of the other things that we tend to adopt in our mindset is that there's no such thing as a retirement date. I think my first retirement was in 2019, and I've been coming back to work in various guises ever since. They can't get rid of me. Somebody told me the other day, you've got more carriage clocks than I've had hot dinners because nobody wants to let you retire. But I think that's an important part of keeping people and retaining people in the organisation.
Thank you for your comment on that. I know we're, by the way, in between everyone and lunch. So I would say that let's keep our comments nice and sharp.
Okay.
So I'm coming to you now, Eleanor, and it's still on the same topic. I like that you've sort of spoken on the Queen Ages, which I love the term. And I took the term to Lagos, by the way. So I'll just like to hear, so everyone's sort of speaking generally on attracting women. Let's speak to attracting Queen Ages. Can you please comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's really germane, because what we see massively in our research about this forged in fire moment of this pivot for Queen Ages at around 45, 50, what we don't really address as a society or think about is the fact that in the 100-year life, we've got this kind of extra new bit of life really between 50 and 75, where we're still, we're not as young as we used to be, but we're certainly not kind of pushing our Zimmer frames around. So there's that really kind of, and we're also being expected to work. So I think that this Queen Age chunk, and it's the same for men too. I'm just particularly interested in the intersectionality of women and age, is we're just not really thinking about that. So we now run a Queenager jobs board on Noon, because so many women leave their organisations because of these pinch points, because they've got a parent who's dying or a teenager who's maybe got anorexia or something, which actually is something which is really intense at the time, but which passes quite quickly. But by that time, the Queenager is out. And then when they try to get back in, they hit terrible problems with algorithms, which knock you out if you're over 50. There's a huge kind of corporate ageism kind of cultural thing around not hiring older people, not really seeing that they've got kind of transferable skills. And then within organisations, not upskilling your older workers, really putting that all onto all your young ones. So I think it's really about a kind of mindset of recognising that if we're all going to have to work till we're 67, 70, then we've got to think about that midlife population within our organisations. And often they're super valuable people. They really have the kind of cultural kind of heritage of your brand, of your organisation in their heads. But maybe they want to work in a different way. I mean, the Queenagers want some flexibility. So I think it's really about reimagining that kind of midlife career stage. I'll shut up, you've had a lot from me.
Thank you very much, Eleanor, for that. I think we can move on swiftly now to our build. Yes, how do we build? So now we're trusting that we've brought them. The women are in now. How do we build them? And I think I'll start with you, Carol, looking at the pharmaceutical industry, where we all know that innovation is very key, considering post-COVID and everything that's been going on around the world. How does GSK foster a culture of diversity and inclusion at all levels? And could you also share light on how? Like if there's been any examples or any initiatives that have been done?
Lots. I mean, as I said earlier, it isn't one size fits all, and I think it's knowing your audience in terms of who you need to promote. One of the or two key things I think that are really important is yes, having initiatives to promote leadership and to actually encourage people to go through the door in the first place is really, really important. And as a coach, I always say to people that you should have a coach, a mentor, a champion, an ally, and a sponsor. And as many of those as you can possibly get during your career. And that is one of the things that we're very keen on within GSK, both internally and externally, so that people get different. I always say you should have a cheerleader team. Equally important for me as well is diverse reverse mentoring. It's so key that the leaders hear a different story, because quite often they are one step removed or two steps removed or 5 steps removed. So I think it's dialogue and communication and seeing life through a different lens is key.
Yes. I think that's very strong point, especially when you mentioned. Sorry, who mentioned? I did note it down somewhere. Someone mentioned, yes, about your boss in Matalan bringing you on, from Co-op to Matalan. That in itself is sponsorship. Kate, I would like to just hear from the Microsoft side of things. What are you doing to build?
I think, for me, I think about it in 2 ways. So one is access to opportunity. That's number one. Number two is this space to fail. So I think having the support to go try something, being okay with failure, but moving on and learning from it. And I think at Microsoft, it's very much like be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. And I feel like sometimes women, at least in my team, in my experience, are a bit scared of that failure. So I think having that safe space and saying, I'd rather you fail, but try it than not. So those two things I think are important.
I really like the space to fail. I read something somewhere that you give yourself daily about 7 fails, and until then you shouldn't feel bad about it. And I think
I fail all the time.
I think since I read that, it's my Bible every day, But honestly, it really is very powerful to hear women's experiences, especially. And I find that I've not really had that many female bosses, but the females that are my sponsors, my mentors, I value when they tell me their story. And I realize when they talk to me that Well, you spoke yesterday on stage. Why didn't you say that? You know, they never want to say things publicly. They tend to leave some stories, you know, and it's not very similar with their male counterparts, you know. I think that's something we need to work on, you know, the importance of speaking about your personal experiences to as many younger people as possible. Yes, there's an onus on male colleagues to definitely be he for she's and supporters and be allies, but there's also that onus on women to also pull the younger ones up, you know, especially when you're there already, you know. I'm going to just come to you now, Catherine. Can you also speak to this on how do we build?
Just one thing that, I mean, alongside everything else that's been said, that I actually actively encourage women to join boards. Not to be the golden skirts, but alongside their middle management or executive careers. Why do I encourage them to do that? Because being on a board is a great affirmation of one's capability. You're sitting around the board as the finance expert, IT expert, whatever. Wow, wouldn't it be amazing to have an energy sector expert around some of the boards that I've sat on? Secondly, it's great developmentally as well. And also it prepares the person for the next stage. So I'm already on a board, so therefore I can take that next step in my executive life as well. So that's just one thing that I do.
I've heard that a lot, you know, people say, yeah, you need to be on boards. How do you get on boards?
Well, first of all, I'd encourage anybody to join the organization Women on Boards.
Okay.
Because that's where you see all of the, board vacancies. But also, there's a huge amount of development that's available through Women on Boards. They've been in the UK now for about 10 years or so, and they're a fantastic organization. I've been a member for years, and I use that facility as a reference point. So I get information about. I sit on panels for them, so I'd encourage that. And it's never too early to start. I think I was first on a board it was a board of governors when I was in my 20s in London. And since then, I've always had something else as my kind of hobby job, if you like, alongside my job, to just keep me fresh and keep me sort of connected to the outside world. Because when you're in a big corporate, you can be completely consumed by what life and culture is like there.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And also, there's something you've mentioned, and it has to do with sectors. How these boards, even though it's in Microsoft, for example, which is tech, it doesn't mean that you're not interested in views from other sectors, right? So I think I would like to put it out to those women that are on boards to, please refer, no matter what sector the people are, it would be great for you to refer other women into the boards you're already in. Anna, I'm going to come to you now. Do you also want to comment on the point on Build?
Build, yeah. So we at Women in Banking Finance, we have 80 big partners, and we are all about working cross industry. So when people have talked about things like mentoring, I think we were the first organisation that ever launched cross-company mentoring. So you talked about network, Eleanor. So one of the reasons that women don't progress is lack of network, and it is very difficult to replicate golf. So we had an absolutely hysterical evening one night in the city, and we were there launching a piece of work called the Good Finance Framework, which is work with the London School of Economics. It's looking at why women leave. Anyway, having this great conversation, there's this lovely lady that had come in from Asia, and she stood up and she said, "Well, what do I do if I don't play golf?" Because everybody in her company plays golf, and everybody was trying to say, well, try to look at other things that you can do. So the board conversation came up. Actually, I'm on 2 boards. I'm on the female lead advisory board, and I'm also on a charity board. So I would say, actually, it's a great way to network as well. If anybody wants to start, charity boards are brilliant. I was on the Young Vic board for 10 years. And before that, I was actually on the development board raising funds for it. And it's really interesting. On our Women in Banking Finance, we'd love to have people from different industries come on our board. Now we're a non-for-profit, we're a social enterprise. We're actually one of the fastest growing social enterprises in the UK last year. We moved a couple of years ago, but it's brilliant skills because we get to see a P&L. I mean, this whole conference, this whole idea of ideas share is absolutely phenomenal. And that's really what boards are about. So that's why I would say to everybody, try a charity. and think about this sort of environment. We would love to see if anybody would be interested in the Women in Banking Finance Board, but also we have lots and lots and lots of other members, so we could also look at them. So we do the same as everybody else, mentoring. We have a shadow board, which I don't know if anybody here has tried something like that. So because we're volunteers, I'm a volunteer CEO, we roll off every 2 or 3 years. So my job is to curate that organisation for the next generation. So for us, a shadow board is really, really important. So these are youngsters that are in the industry up to about 5 years. They work for, honestly, all the investment banks, retail banks. We learn from them. We do reverse mentoring, as you say, but also we help future-proof our organisation. And it's also fantastic for governance and for risk management and for ESG.
I see. Fantastic. I'm not on any board in the UK. I just thought to say that. Yeah, yes. While we're at it. All right, so now we're moving to the final phase, and that's the maintaining diversity. We've brought them, we've built them, now we have to keep them. I know you're very passionate about this one, so you're going to give the last comment on this. And a McKinsey report states that companies with more diverse workforces actually make much more money. But attracting diverse talent is just the first step. The real challenge is to retain, creating an environment where diverse talent actually feel valued, supported, and inspired to stay. This involves mentorship, which we've already spoken about, career advancement, and things like that. So my question is to Kate and Catherine, actually. You can speak one after the other. Technology and retail. Thank you, Queenager, for telling us how important our Queenagers are to their industry. So I'll just like to hear on the retain. What are you doing to retain women?
I might flip the question around. As you know, I think there are not enough women in tech still. I think actually women have a lot of power now. So, and I don't think that's something that I do encourage women to take advantage of, because if, and this is taking my Microsoft hat off, but if there is a role that's bigger, that's better, for you in your career, actually a lot of companies need female tech talent. So capitalize on that. And I don't think enough women necessarily think that way. I think that's just something me as a manager and us as a company need to do more to retain. But as an individual, I wish more women would see that power, because I think it's like gold dust, like finding strong female talent in technology, that cannot be undervalued. So I think the market has flipped.
Yes.
So I didn't answer your question, but hopefully that just gave you a sense of the
it's
market.
connecting it for sure. Catherine, your eldest is not eldest child now, but the eldest staff is 89. 86.
Yeah.
What did you do? Tell us. We want to know the secret.
Well, look, retail does provide a lot of part-time jobs. That is one of the benefits. It allows you to start your career maybe full-time, go part-time, then maybe do a few more years. When you get to the Queenager stage, maybe, all right, ready to go back full-time, or maybe 4 days a week. So there's more flexibility naturally by virtue of the fact that we're a 24/7 kind of organization usually. We're running round the clock. And there are lots of opportunities for people to flex. The second thing I would say is policies that are parent-friendly. And if anybody wants to access the co-op's policies around people, they are openly available because it's a cooperative. They're openly available, whether it's policies about childcare or bereavement leave or whatever. I suppose the third thing I'd say is that retail tends to be fairly educationally agnostic, if you like. So you can have a great degree and work in retail, or you can have no degree and have left school at 16. You can join in an apprenticeship program. You can have joined in a Kickstarter program. So there are quite a number of different routes that we create through usually a dispersed organization. So relocating sometimes gives an option as well for people to be retained. We don't have a job for you here, but if you're up for relocation, we can offer you a promotion there. So sometimes, particularly within a dispersed organization, retail organization within the UK, it's easier to do that.
Okay. I've just been told that our time is fast spent, but I think what I'm hearing here is a cocktail of things. There's no one size fits all, but the allowing women to be flexible and to just, say, this is where I'm at in my life now, and I'm okay to make this decision for myself, for my family. Thank you for that point. I hear our session is very popular and there are lots of questions. So do we have any questions in here yet before we go online? Come on, guys. I just said it was popular. All right. First question is online and it says, thank you. Is there anything the panel think the energy industry are doing really well in diversity and inclusion that you're also learning from? So they've switched it around. Does anybody want to answer this? Anna, do you mind answering?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as familiar with the things you do. One of the things I did look at before I came was just to see if you had, as a highly regulated industry, if you had anything coming top down from your regulator, and the answer is that you don't, which I actually think is really positive. I don't think it's great that finance, if I'm honest with you, because we are here to represent society, that we've got to do it. So I think the ambitions are really interesting. I mean, what I would say is, because you're having such an issue attracting and retaining, is to maybe consider, because I think you are clearly it's something that you're really juggling with, and that's the whole theme of today, and you've done your research. But something that we've done in finance that you might just want to consider as well is that we've got a collaborative, across industry collaborative piece of work called Accelerating Change Together. And it's 20 big financial services companies and the government working with the London School of Economics, and we have gone after the missing middle. So people are talking about, it's our biggest issue. Literally, we can't keep women in finance at all. So you are tinkering around the edges with pipeline stuff. What is great about this program is action. It's action. So the London School of Economics specialise in behavioural science. So it's literally women have told us why they've left, the reasons why, and there's a whole set of interventions. I think if you haven't looked at that kind of cross-collaborative piece, it'd be interesting. We now have a framework that can be delivered at the board level, that can measure. It is voluntary, but it's meaningful because it's come from the bottom up. So the issue about, I think the challenge with government intervention, with regulatory intervention, is that when you're measuring change, you're measuring, from the top down. Whereas actually, if you ask people on the front line, how's it going? Is much changing? They'll often say to you, not really. So I think what I would say to everybody also is the London School of Economics work that we're doing, the ACT framework, would love to invite you to use it as well. There is no charge. We all want the same thing. Yeah. They're an amazing organisation. They do a lot of work, by the way, in your sector. So I'd love to just up of that out. I can send the information out through the organisers.
Please do. Thank you for that question, Katie. As you can see, there's not much they want to learn from us. But we're moving to the second question, which is the gender pay gap. Carol, do you mind apparently this is from Anonymous, saying it's still not improving. What is the plan?
Gender pay gap, right, okay. I mean, as I said earlier, I'm very lucky that GSK has actually got a positive one. But the reality is, when the gender pay gap first was created, at least it actually made the conversation start. I do believe that the actual calculation is fundamentally flawed, but in terms of it makes people think, and it holds people to account in terms of at least peer pressure, if nothing else. But really, you need to look at the commentary from the organisations as to either if they're blagging it or if they actually do mean it, that they actually want to reduce their gender pay gap, and what they're going to do about it. Those are the main things that you need to look at, as opposed to what the number is.
Fantastic.
But we need to almost move on from it to make progress.
There's another question, and you're going to answer this one. It's a very interesting question.
Okay. Because I was doing some work with a large financial institution actually, who were saying, yeah, we've got terrible gender pay gap. We need to hang on to more of our senior women. And so I said, okay, fine, we can do this. And then one of the senior HR people said to me, the trouble is we've done all these female leadership initiatives. We've got all these women like who come back from the leadership course. They're gagging to lead. They're like brilliant, really excited, and they don't give them jobs. So I think that there's also to point out the elephant in the room. There's often some quite kind of jolly initiatives, and everyone thinks, "Oh, brilliant!" And then all these women are really excited and think they're going to get the gig, and they don't actually get given the job. Sheryl Sandberg talks about this huge kind of barrier that men get promoted on potential. And women are always asked for the experience. And of course, there's a point when you become a manager, or particularly when you become senior, where somebody has to take a punt on you. They have to see something in you. They have to believe in you. And I think that the way that our culture sees older women, because of the lack of value that we put on them, we don't see them as those leaders in the way that we should. So I also think it's incumbent on women who are in those positions to really speak up about why it's good to be a powerful woman, why it's good to have the levers, the change that you can bring in, the women that you can bring up, the purpose that you can build within your organization. And I don't think we get enough senior women talking about why somebody might want to be, why younger women might want to be powerful. Maybe it is worth missing the odd school run, because actually you get to do this thing which really makes change, makes difference. And that purpose is what really drives, particularly kind of women who are getting older. And also that crucial bit, 50 to 65. The average age of a female CEO is 56. Average age of a female chair, 61. If the women fall out of the game between 45 and 50, you're never going to get enough senior women at the top.
So this is interesting. You just answered the question, by the way. Because Griselda just asked the question, and I'll give you some context because it's sort of connected to what I'd mentioned about the session I was at yesterday about the Old Boys Club. And the conclusion from that session was that women need to start their own, right? And give that club less power by doing that. So it's sort of connected. So the question here is, I think we also need more women. We need to help women to be more confident, I beg your pardon, with even their own personal finances, so we can invest and be investors and drive change with our own money. My question, can you just speak to that?
I was at a big meeting, actually, at a huge retail bank, a lunch that was put together by one of the most senior women in banking 10 days ago, talking about exactly this. And one of the women in the room was saying there are enough now women, queenagers with money. Women need to become angel investors and invest in other women. I think that's absolutely true. But I also think that we need massive shift within the venture capital community. It seems to be totally wrong that that women entrepreneurs get 1% of VC funding. And until we shift that mentality within where that, I mean, that's the real like engines of power, the levers of power in the world, is who gets invested in. And yes, women can start doing it for themselves and investing in other women, and we definitely need to propel that. But why aren't men investing in women too? I mean, that's the absolute kind of problem. And also the lack of representation of women within those VC companies. And, I mean, I'm not always a fan of quotas, but the conclusion that all these very senior women came to at this lunch was that it's not going to change till there's actually some structural change in who is deciding who gets the money.
Yeah, I think that's.
Do we have any questions in the room?
Do you agree?
I do.
By the way, okay, we suddenly have three.
None to three.
Can you please go ahead and ask a question?
Hi, I'm Mike Hawley from Sandrica. We mentioned how important technology is going to be in the future, and we've touched on personal biases. Do you see that being a problem with technology in the future? I know, Eleanor, you've already touched on it with recruitment and algorithms. Do you see that being an issue or anything we need to overcome in that space?
Massive. So I interviewed Martha Lane Fox a couple of weeks ago, and she said to me that on current trends, it's going backwards in technology, the number of female leaders. That on current trends, we will never get to parity in the tech sector. That's all I wanted to say.
There's different things. So if you think about it when people talk about personal finance, I think where it's going to be really, really important is if you think about risk and bias and all the products that require lending and that sort of stuff. I mean, there's the big scandal, wasn't there, around, you know, Apple and the credit card from Goldman's, and the fact is that algorithm discriminates against women. So at the moment, there's a lot of work going on. There's another piece of regulation, but this is now for consumers in financial services called Consumer Duty. And everybody's looking at their behavioral science and their algorithms and their tech when it comes to looking at debt and the way that we manage that. It's not just consumers, it's for smaller companies. So I think actually it is significantly important when it comes to people's personal finances as well as jobs, tech.
And I think also that going further with that in terms of, I think it's a while back now, but I saw that something like 74% of all coding is written by guys under the age of 30. White guys under the age of 30. That's the problem.
Yeah.
If you're going to automate systems, that is a real problem.
Yeah. Grace.
Your take on this from Microsoft?
I think the biases in our society, the systems we built are going to reflect that. To my earlier point on judgment, I think with tech practitioners, judgment, responsible technology is something a lot of organizations have implemented, like understanding what the results really mean, what's behind them, especially now with AI, understanding the limitations of systems, because historical data is what's being used to feed these models, and guess what? Our historical data doesn't look great. So it's exercising judgment and when it's appropriate and when you need human judgment, which again doesn't solve for all bias, but at least you have that interaction.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Jumping to, I have two people and they're two ladies. I have to take one. Thank you. You were the one that gave me a thumbs up earlier, right? Great.
Hi, I'm Jess Batten from Atkins Realis. I think the point that you raised earlier about having the space to fail is so important. And I know that when I've failed in the past, I've had this just sense of, oh, how can I show my face again? Oh, I've messed up really badly. How do we normalize that and stop women feeling so terrible when they fail and making it okay, normalizing it, making it feel okay?
Catherine, can you comment on that?
I worked with quite a lot of American women when I was working at Barclays in financial services, and they had a wonderful way of making you feel really, really, really bad for about 30 seconds after you'd cocked up on something, and then giving you lots of encouragement and saying, get back on your horse, after you'd... So I think we're far too... I embrace a culture where people give open feedback, and where if it's balanced and helpful, people can recover and learn from it. I think that's a cultural norm. And the other thing I would say in terms of women is that I have a kind of aversion to this term, the imposter syndrome, because I think it's mostly applied to women. And actually, I think all it really is a bit of a lack of confidence when you're new in the job, which everyone feels. And men and women feel that. And the fact that it's called a syndrome and the fact that the word imposter is used also implies that you're not supposed to be in that job. You don't deserve to be in that job. And that is not true. You've been promoted into that job. You're learning the ropes along with everybody else, and you deserve to be there.
I think deserve to be there is the highlight. Yes, you've worked hard enough. You do deserve to be there. I was told we have to go now, but please, just because I already promised everyone 60 seconds. What do you want everybody to take back with them? So I'm only giving you 30 seconds now, starting with you. Oh no, 30.
Very good. Just think about your queenagers, think about age within your workforce. And what I always used to do as a manager is always promote women when they came back from maternity leave. So it's much easier to leave your baby if you feel like your manager really values you and you're being given something really exciting to do.
30 seconds, go ahead.
I would say that there is no ambition gap, that there is an opportunity gap. So that's very, very important. And the other thing is, I believe in quotas. So if you can't measure it, it doesn't count.
Go ahead.
I would say get yourself a cheerleading team. Make sure that you have every single opportunity for people just, so if you do have a moment of you've got other, which everybody does, you've got other people to pick you up and make you fly, because that will make you fly.
Thank you. 30 seconds.
Network. Learn how to network.
Fantastic. Catherine, 30 seconds.
Get yourself a mentor, get yourself a coach, and join women on boards.
My 30 seconds. Can I have it?
Go for it.
Great. I think everyone has a role to play, whether you are top leader, whether you're just starting your career. You just have to figure out what that is and actually make sure you're dedicated to making sure that women are within the fold. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for the online people. Thank you for my speakers.